Good morning. Calling the board to order for the Human Resource Committee. First order of business would be public testimony. I have for Barb Hudman regarding the evaluation.
Good morning.
Good morning.
Ladies and gentlemen.
Please have a seat.
Pardon me?
Please have a seat so you can sit at the mic. Yes.
First of all, I have lived here most of my life since 1941, January 2nd. A few weeks ago, a friend and I went on the bus out to Makaha because we thought there was a meeting. And I hadn't been out that way in quite a few years. And the first thing I saw was the production of the rail, and I went, oh my gosh, a disaster waiting to happen. No common sense. So I have written these few words, which several of you have heard before, and I wrote it years and years ago. The sky above, what little there is left of it to see. The potholes below, the trash in our sewers that ends up out into the sea. Concrete, graft, greed, and corruption surround us. Wait, where is our Hawaii going? Mahalo.
Thank you. Any questions? Next speaker, Roy Nakamura.
Good morning.
Good morning.
The rail project, as it is right now, they have 6 alternatives. Can I add 2 more alternatives for the rail? The first one is knock it down, recycle everything, and get our taxpayers back on their feet again. Because this rail project will cost taxpayers, property taxpayers, huge amount of money. They cannot recover that. If we tear it down now, it's much cheaper. The second alternative that I would wish is turn the thing into one highway. If the people wants it two-way to come in from Kapolei, go back in afternoon, two-way, that would reduce the traffic. Because as it is right now, the mayor's problem is he has too many complaints about traffic problem. Now, from the beginning, if they did this thing right, we wouldn't be in this huge mess nearing $8.1 billion. You know, if you look out there, there's a lot of people. They don't make more than $2,400 a month. The people who got money, let them pay for it. The people under $60,000 a year, they gotta pay sewer fee, electricity bill, water bill. They end up with hardly anything. You know, years ago, people saved money to send the kids to go to college. They cannot do it now, not with this rail. So either knock it down or turn the thing into one highway to Halawa Stadium. And from there, let it branch out. Put your bus stations right from Halawa Stadium into town. My time is up?
No, go ahead. You can finish.
From Halawa Stadium, you get 3 places to go to. Salt Lake Boulevard, Moanalua Highway, the Airport Highway. So if you put buses directly to the shopping center, that's all you need. You don't need no stops. Now, from Kapolei to Aloha Stadium, Kapolei, you have sinkholes. There's a lot of areas that you folks never check. Get sinkholes. On a heavy rain, that water got to go somewhere. And if it goes under the column, who knows? The rail might come down by itself. Now you go over to Eva. You get all those places where they need agriculture, they get endangered birds. You cannot build a rail there. Now, if you go over to Waipahu, you know what the meaning of Waipahu? Y is water. Pahu is pound drum. That means there's water under there that spreads out. Under by bank, what's that place? Our car store. There's water that goes into Pearl Harbor. It's underground. You folks never checked that. Now, if you go over Waipahu, you come into Pearl City. You get all the electrical lines. There's water line, gas line, oil lines under there. In fact, one of your contractors clipped that gas line, and it proves that there's gas line under Pearl City. So if you ended at Aloha Stadium and get one bus station there instead of, further down in Waipahu, you can branch out so fast. And a lot of these buses are empty. So the rail gonna collect all, you mean to tell me the rail gonna collect all those passengers just to come into Ala Moana Shopping Center? I don't think so. They're gonna have to transfer other places. So get the bus route going everywhere, then they don't have to transfer.
Okay, thank you.
And what is a ridership? What is the fare to ride the rail? That never was mentioned. And the maintenance costs. That's the two things that the public don't know. And they need to know. Because if it's too expensive, they're going to say, why should we ride the rail? Better put in gas. Because we drive right to the doorstep where we need to go. Thank you.
Thank you.
I took enough time.
Thank you. Barbara, you wave your hand when you want to speak, or? Thank you. Okay. Yes, any more testimony?
No.
Thank you, Chair. Members of the board, actually I was gonna wait until the board meeting or the board of directors meeting to come out and make a statement, but since the fine gentleman, fine lady out there made some statements about the not wanting the rail and the cost and all of that, we need to seriously look at what's happening on the west side. I brought this up on several meetings, and what's going to happen in the event this rail project don't go through. I know the cost is a big factor, and I'm taking my union hat off. I'm putting my resident hat on, because that's where I live. I get stuck in traffic. I got caught in traffic again this morning. It's mind-boggling to believe that our district or the west side don't have alternatives. We got one way to get in, and that's the H1. I know there's a big question about the cost. Yeah, we're concerned about the cost too. Hopefully the board and Mr. Guabaskis can look at areas that we can maybe shave off some of the monies that these guys are anticipating on paying. But, they put everything on our side. Yeah? We get the refineries. We get one MSW landfill. We get one demolition landfill, construction landfill, right in the heart of Nanakuli. Yeah? They put the refineries, they got the electric plant there. Everything's coming out in our area. They're looking at the city's sustainability plan. I believe looking at 24% of the island residents in the Kapolei area. Now we're looking at over probably 230,000 people living in our area. They got Ho'opili coming up. Another 12,000 residents that's probably gonna be living there, each one owning 3-4 cars. We got Core Ridge coming up. Again, I was gonna save this testimony for the board meeting, but since, I'm here, I may not be now required to stay. But I will anyway, because we don't know what's gonna happen and when you guys do have the next meeting. But anyway, we were assured at the neighborhood board meetings when we pushed for rail, especially with the whole Peely project. Mel and the rest of the people that was out there for Go Rail Go, you know, we're looking at alternatives when we build whole Peely. We're gonna get the rail coming right alongside whole Peely, bringing these people in. All we ask is we seriously look at what we can do to continue this rail project. Thank you.
Thank you. Yes, go ahead.
Yeah, Mel, I want to thank you for being here this morning. You've been with many controversial projects that in the end had tremendous benefits to the communities in those areas. You've been here on the Kalani Island widening project at H1, H2, and H3, which is heavily utilized today and enjoyed by everybody that lives on that end of the island. This is a project that, you know, like you say, you come here this morning saying that you got stuck in traffic, and this is one of the avenues that we can give you folks on the west side to mitigate that traffic problem for you folks.
You know, thank you, Buzzy. You know, that's the biggest problem we have. Trying to get into town. It took us 2.5 hours before. When I first moved there, that was 43 years ago, up in Makakilo. It took me 17 minutes when I was working for Honolulu Gas Company. It took me 17 minutes from Makakilo to Pier 36. Now it averaged at least 2 hours. So, you know, we've been involved in a lot of the projects, a lot of the construction projects, a lot of the widening, the Kalana on Ole. You know, we were involved with H3, H2. You know, everybody's got alternatives. You live in Kaneohe, damn, you got Liki, you get Pali. If you want H3 and enjoy the scenery, you can drive to H3. We don't have one. All we got is H1. And getting stuck in traffic every day is mindless when there's an option that we can possibly look at putting up the rail project.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you, Chair. Thank you, board members.
Anybody else wishing to testify? If not, moving to item number 3, approval of the minutes, which is in your binder. Is there any correction to the minutes? Seeing no correction, all those approved say aye.
Aye.
Aye. Motion carried. Item number 4, extension of the deadline to evaluate Executive Director and CEO. Is there anyone wishing to testify at this time? And this is a real voting matter. If not, if we turn to again to our binders, we have an extension deadline that we have extended. We had presented to Dan Grabowskis, and he had sent a letter back saying that he is willing to accept the extension to August 21st, I believe.
That's right.
Correct. Original date was June 21st. So is there any other questions? If not, can I get a motion to approve the extension letter? So moved. There's a second. All those in favor, aye.
Aye.
All those opposed, motion is carried. Thank you very much, Dan. Before we move to item 5, Executive Director, CEO against performance coming up, is there any questions moving to executive session before that? If not, I call for a motion to enter into executive session pursuant to Hawaii Revised Status Section 92.4 and subsections 92-5A4, 92-5A2 to consider the annual evaluation of the Executive Director CEO where consideration of matters affecting policy will be involved, and to consult with the committee's board's attorneys on questions and issues pertaining to the committee's board's powers, duties, privileges, immunities, and liabilities with regard to this matter. So, do I hear a second? All those in favor, aye.
Aye.
All those opposed? We are now in executive session. I'd like to call us back. back from executive session. Before we continue, I still have a testimony. Barbara Armatrout, would you like to testify?
Good morning. Barbara Armentrout. I'm a member of Neighborhood Board 5, but I'm speaking as an individual. I would have liked to speak on a lot of different things after you made the presentation, but I would suggest you have some of these other meetings the day before you have the Board of Directors, because your agendas are getting longer and longer, and the public come and they wait to testify. And we wait hours, and then we can't stay for the whole thing, and I just don't think that's fair to the public that do show up. But anyway, I wanted to say something regarding the change order. Okay, the change order.
Barbara, excuse me, but we're still on the HR committee, and I apologize because, yeah, I know what you're
I'm
saying.
sorry, I thought you were on the Board of Directors.
No, not yet.
Oh, okay, sorry. Oh,
You have
the next
anything-
one then. No,
but
no, no.
anything? Okay.
I have nothing on that.
Thank you. Does anybody else wish to testify? If not, coming back from executive session, we still are continuing our evaluation. We do have an extension to August 21st. So as I said, we're still continuing on the evaluation itself. Can I get a motion to adjourn? So move. Second? Second. All those in favor, aye. Aye. Those opposed? HR meeting agenda.
Calling to order the Board of Directors meeting of June 16, 2016. We'll begin with public testimony on all agenda items. Ms. Armatrot, will we begin with you? And our apologies for running late. Thank you. Barbara Armatrot. For the record, I'm a member of Neighborhood Board 5, but I'm speaking as an individual. I just wish that some of these human resource meetings and the other meetings that you have to have before the Board of Directors are done like the day before, because the Board of Directors meetings are getting so long, and you have public coming here waiting to testify, and it just lasts all day long, and when you're taking the handy van, you have to order it the day before. You're not sure how to do it. But anyway, nevertheless, I want to thank Ivan Louis Kwan for your service on the board. You've been a good board member. Thank you for all the years that you've done that. And I want to speak also about the change order that's going through for the contaminated soil. I just want to make a comment regarding the figures on this come to $1,640,700, but you're requesting, HART is requesting $1,875,000 for the provisional sum. I would say only give them what it's listed, $1,640,700. And if they need more, let them come back and ask for that other $234,300. Because where is that going to go if they don't need that extra? They're just going to absorb it into something else. I don't know why they're asking for $1,875,000 when it's $1,640,700. Also, I'm speaking in support of the Pearl Highlands parking garage and transit center, because that is sorely needed. You definitely need that parking garage out there. Why it was ever canceled, I do not know, but they need that for people to come to park their cars so that they can ride the rail and actually ride the rail into town. And then, well, you're asking for more commercial paper. I have really nothing more to say on that, because years ago, you said you were only going to ask for this once from city council, and you keep asking. So thank you very much.
Thank you. Any questions of Ms. Armitrot, members? Not, thank you very much. Natalie Iwasa, you're going to talk during discussion?
On one item, on 2 items, but I have one in the beginning. Thank you, Natalie Wassa, for the record. Yeah, I'm going to have to leave early, so the item on the commercial paper I'd like to testify on now. Several things. It was reported in the news that you think that the HART doesn't have to reauthorize. So I just wanted to ask you, when you're doing discussion on this, to look at a couple of things. First, the memorandum of understanding clearly indicates that commercial paper is included in the term project bonds. And then it indicates on section 2.03 that any that the HART will issue a request in the form of a resolution adopted by the board to issue the commercial paper. And then also on the resolution 15.7, which was adopted by council last fall, it also says that HART shall submit a request in writing via a resolution adopted by the board of directors. And that, I don't know what your intent was, but my understanding from when I went to all the council meetings, every time this issue of bonds and debt came up, Ann Kobayashi would ask, so will HART be coming back with a separate resolution when you're ready? And the answer was always yes. So I ask you to take a look at that. The other things I wanted to point out with respect to this is that the cash flow projection, I think really what we need to do is have a monthly cash flow projection through the end of next fiscal year, and especially when you're looking at short-term debt borrowing. So I would imagine that the council will be requesting that anyway. And then on the slide presentation that goes along with this, there is a math error again. The estimated cash balance at July 29th, 2016, it says $25,800,000. It should be $25,700,000. So just, I ask you to look at that, and I'm, you know, the intent was to have a separate resolution, I believe. Thank you.
Thank you, Ms. Wasserman. Members, any questions? If not, thank you very much. The mayor, Mayor Kirk Caldwell. We have a question if you submitted, but you know, we do take people who just show up sometimes.
Thank you, Madam Chair. I also want to thank the other members of the board for the really, really hard work you've been doing. I have to say, in the past 6-7 months, you guys have been carrying a lot of heavy work, and you've been doing great in terms of the questions you're asking, and just making sure the public understands fully and completely the challenges we face today. And I'm here to talk to you about those challenges and the requests that I have. As you know, on May 12th, Leslie Rogers asked to meet with me and have Carolyn Flowers, the acting chair of the FTA, on the phone from DC. It was 8 o'clock in the evening when she was on the phone with us. I asked Ernie Martin to sit in on the meeting, and I asked, and he had Laura Figueroa come up too. And at that meeting, as you know, Leslie Rogers delivered to us what they thought the true cost of the rail project was going to be. At 65% probability, at the high end, he said it's going to be about $8.1 billion. And he said, you also know, given the GET collections, estimated collections, and what you're getting from the FTA in terms of $1.55 billion, you're looking at about $6.8 billion. So you have this funding gap, and you need to decide how you're going to meet that gap and how you're going to build a fully functional system. And he must have said it 10 times to me, fully functional, fully functional. And I asked him, what does that mean? And he says, a system that could be modified, but in modifying it, you have to make sure you have the ridership level sufficient to make sure that your subsidy is reasonable. And of course, if you shorten, if you change your route, this impacts ridership, and we're concerned. But we're not going to tell you what to do. We want to get a proposal from you. And then on June 6th, we got another letter from Leslie Rogers, which he said, we want to get your recovery plan. This is what he talked about on the 12th. by August 7th. And so timing becomes extremely important. Around the same time, HART staff presented to the HART board a couple of things. One, they provided 6 options of different things to look at, from moving the route down to Nimitz, to shortening, to all kinds of things. And at the same time, they came up with new adjusted projections at the high end. I'm taking the high end because I believe the high end is probably where it's going to be, unfortunately. I hope it's less, but let's be realistic, start at high. At a 65% probability, they're even higher now than what Leslie Rogers told us, at 8.3 billion and counting. So we can look at the alternatives presented by HART, but all of them have cost implications, revenue implications, ridership implications. And to really get answers to those implications, I don't think it's possible to do it by August 7th. It just takes a lot of studying born on Nimitz. You have utilities going underneath the road. I just met with Fudge Matsuda, the former director of transportation, a great guy. He said, do you know what kind of utilities you have running under Nimitz in terms of oil pipelines and the things you'd have to relocate? And therefore, I'm asking the HART board today, as a policy-making authority for HART, to make a recommendation to the Honolulu City Council, which is the policy-making body for the city and county of Honolulu, to take appropriate action now and come up with the appropriate option to consider and present it to the Honolulu City Council so they can consider it through resolution. Because we have to do this all by August 7th. That's less than 2 months from now. And I think what needs to happen is the council needs to take up your recommendation through a scheduled public hearing. As you know, those things take a while, and you got to notify, and you got to have sunshine. And thereafter, once the council acts, there has to be a recovery plan that's developed by HART and presented to the FTA for its consideration. It doesn't mean it'll be accepted. They need to look at it, and from there, a new full funding grant agreement would have to be negotiated. So Chair Martin and I have talked, and we agree on this. We agree that the fixed guideway route of the locally preferred alternative that was approved by the council years ago and supported by the voters of this island should not be altered. It's too hard to alter it. And we agree that we must live within the revenue boundaries that we're faced with today, whether it be 6.8 billion or 7, depending on what GET is going to be, both from the 1.55 billion we collect from the Federal Transit Administration or what we collect from the 0.5% GET surcharge. That, by the way, was approved by the legislature. In fact, Madam Chair was there when we first approved it. Approved again by the legislature when you got the 5-year extension, signed by the governor, and approved by the city council. So 6.8 billion, or maybe 7 at the high end, where does it get us? I think most people agree it gets us to Middle Street with some money left over, which is important that we have some money left over. And the beauty of getting to Middle Street is that you're at the transit center that came online when I first became mayor. And it's a great center, and buses pull in and out. So it's stubbing out, ending out in an area that we can then use buses to get the rest of the way into town. That means we built about 15 miles of the 20 miles. We have 5 miles left of the minimum operating segment. And I have to say, I wish we could go all the way to Ala Moana now. And I really wish we could go up to UH Manoa. I think even those who are against rail, including folks like Councilwoman Ann Kobayashi, have said, hey, Kirk, if we went to Manoa, I could maybe get a little more interested in this. You know, she lives in that area, as I do. And why I wish we could get further is the heaviest ridership is the station at Ala Moana. Not because people shop there, but people go there and then quickly into Waikiki, where we have a huge workforce, and up to UH Manoa. But that's for another day, in my mind. It's for another day, working with our partners, federal, state, county, public-private partnerships, should additional funding become available. But I think we need to focus for now on how do we get to Middle Street. And I want to emphasize, I'm totally committed to going further. But let's focus on what we can do with the money we have. And therefore, today I'm asking the HART board to hold a public hearing to consider endorse a proposal to start off with the first 15 miles, ending at Middle Street from the Kroc Center. And after discussion is made and so that proposal be supported, that it be conveyed to the Honolulu City Council as a policy-making authority for the city, and that the Honolulu City Council hold the appropriate hearing under a resolution to get public input. And I will support these efforts in any way I can. Again, I want to say it doesn't preclude future extensions. And I do believe, by the way, every system ever built, you don't build the first 10, 20, or 15 miles. I went to school in Boston, first system in the country, 0.8 of a mile, and it's now 800 miles. It's built over time, giving the funding sources that we have available. But let's do a good job for the first 15 miles, and then we can talk about the rest later. I really want to thank you for allowing me to come to testify. I didn't call up and say I was coming. Madam Chair, I appreciate it, and for letting me cut in. If I cut in, I apologize to anyone else that's here, and for taking up some of your time. But I want to say from the bottom of my heart, I want to thank each and every one of you for the work you're doing. These meetings go on for a long time, but it's really, really important. The biggest construction project in the history of this place. And yes, it's a lot of money, and there's a lot of impact. But the legacy that you're building for those 50, 100 years from now is what's critically important. Everyone will forget our actions of what we do here today. But some kid 20 years from now will get on the train in Waipahu with his surfboard to go surfing at Alamona Bowls. His mother and father will know he'll be safe going to and from having fun. And it's your gift that you're giving to this community. And I appreciate you staying the course and for the heat you take. And I just want to thank you so much. With that, if you have a question, if not, I'm going to run off to another function, but I'm more than happy if you have any questions.
Thank you. Members, anyone have any questions of the mayor? Not? Thank you, sir.
Thank you, Madam Chair, and thank you, members of the board. Mahalo.
Thank you. Mahalo. Mel Kahele.
Thank you, Chair, honorables, board members. You know, actually, I wasn't going to testify. I already did in the HR committee meeting, or hearing. But, you know, I just want to add what I already stated prior meetings. You know, when we voted in 2008, it wasn't for a 15-mile project. It was for a 20-mile project. You know, the intent was to move the people out of our area or on the Leeward Coast and give us an alternative. You know, traffic out there is horrendous. And I'm not going to mention about all of the hard work and all of the monies that we put in, not only with the Iron Workers Union, but also monies that was put in by many of the businesses out there. There's one concern that I just noticed regarding the change of order, the almost $1.9 million for the removal of the soil. I believe they're considering it as contaminated soil. 15,000 cubic yards is going to be moved into, again, our backyard, into PVT landfill. And I guess the concern that I have is what I mentioned earlier about everything goes on our end. Refineries with the big Hawaiian Electric plant, 2 landfills, one MSW landfill, now PVT landfill that's been there for years. Now we dump it more. It's like, I don't know who made the determination whether it's contaminated or hazardous soil, but I'm hoping that the board look seriously into what kind of soil that you guys bringing into our neighborhood. You know, so, you know, just don't dump all of you guys Opala or all the islands Opala in our backyards. Again, you know, that's one big concern that we have. Everybody's forgetting about what the whole purpose of rail was supposed to have been designed for. It was supposed to help alleviate, not eliminate, but alleviate a lot of the traffic for us people in our area. With that being said, thank you very much, Chair, board members.
Thank you, Mel. Any questions of Mr. Kahele? No. Thank you. Anyone else wishing to testify on any of the agenda items today? If not, members, we'll move on. It's the approval of the May 12, 2016 minutes of the meeting of the Board of Directors. Any discussion, members? By the way, any comments from the public, because this is a voting issue? Anyone? Not? No corrections, no comments? Then may I have a motion to approve the board May 12, 2016 minutes? Moved by and seconded. Any further discussion, members? If not, do we have unanimous consent on that?
Yes.
Yes, we do. Thank you very much. Next is board committee membership. Actually, this is just one person, Mr. Matsumoto, so.
I thought you were being charitable.
No. So we are going to, with your permission, we've put you on PIGS in the last meeting, but we're also going to add you onto the Project Oversight Committee.
Okay.
Any comments, members? That's a prerogative of the chair, so thank you very much. The next is board leadership election. Gee, it seems like we just did this. All right, board leadership election, members. What is the prerogative of the board?
So I make a motion to move to retain Colleen Hanabusa for whatever time she has left to remain as the chair of the
Sound
board.
like I'm dying.
Not in your life, in one of your many careers that you've been having.
I'll second the motion.
Members, it's been moved and seconded that I stay for as long as
As long as you can.
Any discussion, members? If not, any members of the public would like to say anything? Because this is a voting matter. Ms. Armitrot.
Barbara Armitrot, for the record, I'm a member at Neighborhood Board 5, and I hope you do stay on as the head of the board, because it was your letter and your writing about the 5307 funds that spurred me to get them out of here and back to the bus. So thank you.
Thank you very much, Barbara. Please don't remind Mr. Formby about that. Thank you. Thank you very much, Barbara. Any questions of Ms. Armitrot, by the way? No. Thank you very much. Any further discussions, members? If not, I guess we have to vote. Is call for the question. Do we have unanimous consent on this?
Yes.
Yes. Thank you very much, and I accept, I think, until my end. Thank you very much, members. And do we have to go vice chair too? Members, vice chair?
Madam Chair, I move that we elect Damian Kim as vice chair.
Second the motion.
It's been moved and seconded that it's Damian Kim. Oh, before we get there, and members of the public, anyone wishing to testify on the election of vice chair? If not, we have a motion and a second for Damian Kim, board member Damian Kim, to continue to serve as vice chair of this board. Members, any discussion? If not, may I have unanimous consent on this?
Yes.
Thank you very much. Congratulations. I believe that as to the other committee members, the committee membership, it will be as indicated before. Can we just do it that way?
Yes.
Thank you. Thank you very much, members. So with that, that's all right, election, Cindy. Next is it's resolution 2016-17, and that is our acknowledgement and really mahalo to Ivan Louis Kwan for his years of service. Members of the public, anyone wishing to testify on this matter? We will be voting on it because it's a resolution. I know Ms. Armitrot already made her sentiments known. Thank you very much. Not members, any comments? Yes.
First of all, I want to recognize and thank Ivan. I've, been with him from the start of the HART board and went through him as a chair, vice chair and chair. And, I want to thank you for your time, your expertise, and your knowledge that you've given us all through the years. I really appreciate your high-paying service to us over here on the board. But like I said, not just that, but your friendship and your knowledge that you brought to the board. So thank you so much for your time.
Thank you.
Any other comments?
Sure.
Yes.
Yeah, just, I guess on behalf of the administration, I also want to congratulate and thank Ivan Louis Kwan for his service. I don't think anybody can doubt his commitment to this project. It's been 100 and, if not 150%, and we're in a better place because of your service, Ivan, so thank you very much.
Thank you.
Any other comments? Yes.
Both as a member of the public before joining the board and then as a board member, I want to express my gratitude and appreciation to you, Ivan, because before joining the board, he took it upon himself to meet with me and to bring me up to speed on a lot of the pressing issues and the demands and the challenges of this project. So I really appreciated that, and having served with him as a member, I can say that Ivan is incredibly dedicated to this project and to the welfare of the residents of the city and county of Honolulu. And so for that, I express my fondest mahalo and aloha.
Mahalo nui. Thank you.
Any other members? Yes, Mr. Hong.
As one of the original members on this board, I classified as one of the dinosaurs. We really appreciate you being with us as we formalize this board in the beginning and walking us through all the different lawsuits and accepting the chair for the period that you did. And we're certainly grateful for all your dedication.
Thank you, Buzz.
Thank you.
Any other members? I would like to add something. I'm in a very unique position because though there's no prohibition on nepotism, Ivan and I share the distinction of having been the Hanai children of Auntie Aggie Cope. And it's a distinction that both of us wear very proudly. And so I've always known Ivan and considered him part of my family, and have always been very fortunate that Auntie Aggie adopted the both of us. In addition, Ivan and I have had the wonderful opportunity to serve together on my alma mater's board of trustees, St. Andrew's Priory. So I get to continue to see Ivan. And I look forward to that. But Ivan, I echo what everyone else has said about your service. And I do want to make this clear, because when I went to Hilo, people could not believe this, but it is because it is such a high-paying board. 0 of 0 is still 0, and so we deeply appreciate the service. Anyone else? If not, yes.
I just want, if I may,
Executive
Chair.
Director.
There's a very special line in the resolution that a lot of staff members urged that be included, and that's a line about the staff's personal appreciation, one by one, to Ivan. Those innumerable meetings that he attended, he was in the trenches with all the rest of us, and really helped to lift the load and make it lighter for everybody. Not as somebody who was above us, but really somebody who was, again, in the trenches with us. And a number of staff have just said that if I had an opportunity during the resolution discussion just to say a sincere mahalo nui from all of us at the staff, who really, really appreciated you making our burden lighter. And when we had some tough times, you were there to give a word of encouragement almost at every single meeting. So just thank you so much.
Thank you, Dan.
Thank you. Anyone else? If not, members, what I'd like is first a motion for the adoption of Resolution 2016-17, which is an acknowledgement and appreciation of Ivan Louis Kwan. May I have that motion?
So moved.
Moved by Vice Chair Kim. Second? Second by Mr. Hong. Any further discussion, members?
Madam Chair, can I say a few words?
Sure.
Should I wait until the motion?
I think you should wait till we
Okay.
actually give you the resolution. So members, do I have unanimous consent on this?
Yes.
Yes, thank you very much. And you have to wait till you get your leg.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Thank you,
Floor is
Madam Chair.
yours.
I don't know how to adequately express my very deep mahalo nui loa and appreciation for everyone here, the board members, the staff, the people, but it's been a great honor to be of service to the people of the city and county of Honolulu through this project, which we all know is so important. So with your indulgence, Madam Chair, I'd like to just say a few words of appreciation to different people. I was first from the city council. Some of us are appointed by the city council, some by the mayor, some ex officio, and Terry's appointed by us. But I was invited to be a board member from Tulsi Gabbard, and she encouraged me to give service, and I'm very appreciative that she made that invitation, and she's continued to provide encouragement. I also like to thank the chair at that time, Nestor Garcia, and the current chair, Ernie Morton. I've always felt like Chair Martin has been very open to my concerns, my interests for the project, and so has provided a good listening ear, and I appreciate the opportunity to listen to his as well. I want to thank Mayor Kirk Caldwell. He's been just an amazing champion for this project. I think what those two groups indicate, both the mayor and the city council, is that even though we are a semi-autonomous body, clearly the mayor and the city council play a major role in this project. It's pretty obvious, but they're the ones that really take the hits from the people as a result of what we do or we don't do. And I think, I know everyone here is very sensitive to that. I know I've been very, very sensitive in trying to acknowledge their role that they play, even though the charter is structured in its own way, providing us with semi-autonomy. I want to thank the people who show up, like Barbara Armentrout and Russell Honma. And earlier in the morning, I thank Barbara for that Christmas card that she gave us. I know I got a card, and we rarely get mahalo nui for service on this board, so Barbara getting that card really meant a lot. And so since I've announced that I'm not going to be reappointed, people off the street, strangers have been telling me, thank you for your service. And so I think there's encouragement to all of us here that some people do appreciate, the work that we do. I wanted to thank also the board members, as Buzz and Damien have indicated, we were part of the original 10. And so I have very deep affection for Buzz and Damien and Don Horner as well. I feel a sense of regret that Don never had the opportunity to say goodbye, but he was here at the beginning, and just between the two of us, he and I, we had a lot of differences of opinion, particularly with respect to interpretation of the charter. But at the end of the day, I felt like all of us on this board, that we do this because of our belief that this project is really going to serve the people of the city and county of Honolulu, and I saw that in Don. He gave his, his all for it, as we all do. But I also want to thank all the board members, not just the old, but the new, because I see the amazing talent that you folks provide, to service on this board. And we all know that, as our chair says from time to time, the compensation is not the best. And also, I'd like, Madam Chair, again, I feel great appreciation for my relationship with you as Hanai, brother and sister to Auntie Aggie, and I'm sure glad when we did the policies we never did a nepotism policy. The last I'd like to do is to thank the staff. The staff, for the viewing audience particularly, you know, the staff at HART is amazing. They work really hard, they do their best, and it's, you know, I get inspired by their commitment and what they do. I've had the honor to serve, you know, with mainly the senior management, Joyce Oliveira, Cindy Matsushita, Diana Rakaki, Bill Brennan, Brennan Morioka, and also with Dan. I'd like to share, Hanabus and I are Hanai brother and sister, but also one of our Hanai brothers is Kamaki Kanahele. He is the birth child of Auntie Aggie. And Kamaki asked me to communicate a message on his behalf to Dan. He wanted Dan to express his deep appreciation for your sensitivity in coming out, you know, to meet with the Native Hawaiian community and their leaders, meeting with his mom, and showing your care for the people, and particularly from the people on the west side. And he acknowledged, he says, you know, it's really hard coming from the mainland to Hawaii and taking on a project like this, but that we should demonstrate our appreciation for people who do it, like Dan. So Dan, thank you very much for, you know, for coming to Hawaii and providing such service to our people. So, Madam Chair, thank you very much for the opportunity to express myself.
Thank you, and thank you again, Ivan, for great years of service. On behalf of the people of the City and County of Honolulu, the HART staff, fellow board members, and I'm sure council as well as the mayor fully appreciates what you've done. Thank you. Thank you. Members, we're going to move on to item number 7. This is a discussion of the Federal Transit Administration's recovery plan request. I have Dan and Sam on this. And just so that we're clear, members, there is the actual letter that the mayor referenced in our binders, and that is the letter from Leslie Rogers. And in addition to that, we have, that's, I think, received on June 6th. And I'm hoping that everyone has a copy of the letter from Chair Martin dated June 14th, 2016. We were all copied on that letter. And as the mayor indicated, the chair is also requesting the consideration of basically to end the construction at Middle Street. I believe the chair, as well as the mayor, echo one request that they share, and that is that this board actually make the recommendation to City Council. City Council will adopt, if it wants to, by resolution, and the mayor will have some kind of interface at that time. Then it will come back to HART, and the anticipation at that time is HART will then probably direct the staff to go and negotiate with the FTA on the recovery requests. I think I've stated the respective positions correctly, but with that, let me turn it over to is this going to be Sam or Dan?
So I'll just make a brief remarks, then I'll turn it over to Sam. As recently as this morning, Sam and I have both had conversations with Leslie Rogers, the regional administrator, just to clarify the position that he has laid out in the letter. And in sum, what he has responded to us is that while he has heard that there are interest in some parties of seeking additional revenues at some point, he has made it clear to us, at least today, as again recently as today, is that the recovery plan is meant to be responsive to their request. What would the City and County of Honolulu like to build, assuming that it had only the monies that it has currently available to it, the $6.8 billion that the mayor discussed. So they expect that we may have a reference, or may not, but we may have a reference in there to wanting to do more, get to the MOS. But the expectation is that the policymakers would direct staff to put together a plan and then negotiate that on their behalf to we'd build to the budget, as it were, as you'd stated before, Chair. And so with that, maybe I'll just turn it over to Sam. You can just talk about what we're thinking about. There has been a question raised as to whether or not all of this can be accomplished by August 7th. So we have talked to the regional administrator about the possibility of sending a letter to him just explaining what this process would look like for us, and that it may take a little longer, but maybe Sam, you could talk about that.
Yes, in response to that, we are preparing a draft letter. The original letter on June 6th is addressed both to the mayor and to Dan. We're preparing a draft that tells the FTA that we are proceeding with some of the recommendation suggestions they had, rebaselining the cost and schedule. They mentioned a permanent risk manager, which we have done already, updating the PMP, which we of course we're doing, and streamlining and updating. Both of those go together. As you go through a different phase in the project, you go from design to construction, you always go over your PMP, your project management plan again. And we're certainly doing that. But as far as developing the recovery plan, we have indicated to the FTA, to Leslie Rogers, and we did on the phone, that it's going to take some time, as the mayor mentioned earlier. It's pretty heavy lifting to do that and to look at the ridership. We are doing that. We're telling him we're going to send him a roadmap, a schedule of how long everything's going to take. We're going to lay it out, and we're going to get him that letter before August 7th. But the actual recovery plan is obviously going to take longer. It takes a lot of work, as the mayor pointed out. And he's open to that. He said, just give me an explanation. Tell me about the process. You heard earlier that the mayor mentioned about a working group that would come from the administration, would come from the council, and would come from HART. But even to put those together, we have those permitted interaction groups that have to be developed, and they take time. And Leslie Rogers does understand that and appreciates it. He just wants it in writing. The last item I might mention is that they mention in their letter about a peer review. A few of us, Dan Brennan and myself, are going to the American Public Transportation Association meeting starting this weekend. And we're meeting with other transit agencies at that time, industry experts, to hopefully develop a peer review that can take a look at what we're doing and give us advice of similar expenses that they've been through. So we hear what the mayor's done and certainly what the chair has said, and hopefully we're going to proceed and be able to respond back and come up with the right project for the city of Honolulu.
So the one question if I may ask for direction to staff is, obviously one of the alternatives that was presented by Brendan Morioka last week was the Middle Street option, which we are in the process of studying. Given the communications from the mayor and the city council, I'd welcome the board's direction. Are there other alternatives you'd like us to continue to also look at, or would you want us to spend time on that one particular alternative?
Members, the question is, you've heard both the mayor say, because we can afford to get to Middle Street and we are building to budget, and Chair Martin, in his letter that all of you should have copies of, dated June 14, also says, I urge the HART Board of Directors to consider endorse a proposal to end the construction at Middle Street and to formally convey the decision to the City Council for appropriate action. Members, do any of you, after the session we had on June 8th, is there any other consideration that you would like for the staff to consider in evaluating this?
So, Chair, if I can
Yes.
just. So I think to answer that question sort of indirectly, I support Chair Martin and the mayor's position, and I think what I would like to see is that when you look at that option, that you look at the additional revenue that's available on the $6.8 billion, the projected revenue, and let us know what the excess is and what that excess would translate to in extra contingency if we did stop at Middle Street and we included, as necessary, a crossover. Because I know there's going to be cost associated with the crossover, and I don't think we factored all of that in yet. But if we could get as thorough an estimate as possible, and then we know what the delta is for, other types of efforts that we may have to do to make it work, I think it helps us. But I'll tell you that that I support it because the council did approve it as the MOS of the LPA, so it's clearly within our plan. We've got the EIS and the ROD, we've got everything we need. We've got ridership numbers for all the stations up to that point, so I think the ridership delta is easier for us to figure out, just looking at postponing that last section versus just a permanent stop. So I support it, and I just would like to get more granularity associated with the Middle Street stop.
Members, any other comments or questions?
Yeah, I do. Can I ask, and I don't know if it's appropriate when you folks take a look at this estimate and getting your numbers together, but right now, you know, you have all that construction that's happening in Kaka'ako. What does it impact that down over there as far as, you know, you got Sanford Cars, Keoho Place that is banking on a station being at that corner. Now it's not going to happen. You know, can you get a talk to him about how does that impact his project, if there is any as well too, along that whole corridor itself, because, you know, that is whether construction is going to stop now because of that, whether they're going to continue and, you know, just keep it on the side that, you know, later on in the future, like you said, as monies come available, we continue the line later on. So I don't know if that's appropriate, but I think that's kind of important because that would impact the economy as well in the GT tax if things are going to stop.
Absolutely.
Yes.
I just have some concern about our contract with Ansaldo, what the cost and ramifications would be.
Yes. So those would be all, I'm not sure that those are issues, Sam, that FTA would be interested in, as much as something that HART, of course, has to consider as to what the contract ramifications will be for this project. Do you know from your experience?
I definitely think they are considerations. The point that Board Member Kim brings up is extremely important. And certainly the point that Board Member Hong brings up, it will affect the contract. And we have to take that into consideration, and that will be an impact to the overall budget. So it's pretty observant of him to bring that up.
Yes.
Sam, have you or Dan discussed with the FTA this possible option and what their preliminary reaction to that is?
They haven't given a comment on any particular one. They said, bring what you think is the best option for Honolulu forward, and we will consider it. But they seem very open to any option that we have that makes financial sense. They're very sensitive to where we are. They're very aware of the situation that we're in. And they said they will consider anything that we present.
And I heard that in Washington as well as from the Region 9 administrator.
And so but are they viewing it where if we stop at Middle Street, they're not going to reduce our $1.55 billion?
They've not given any indication at all, but they certainly have not threatened us with that in any way.
The only I won't say it's contradictory direction, but the only other thing that they did put out there was, and it's been referenced, is that while they want to see a plan that is well within the budget we have so that we don't go back and ask for less again, the other part of it is that they do want us to see, with what's remaining in the budget, how far we can get to try to maximize ridership. So Director Formby's question is actually right on point. We're going to be asked that by the FTA. If they see too excessive amount of money left over, and there's the pendulum, right, then they may say, well, could you get a little bit further? But I think one of the considerations that we've looked at already is that there are certain stations that just don't make sense to have as a terminus. And the reason that Middle Street makes so much sense in many ways is because it is a bus hub, and it makes the ability for connectivity to the bus system so much better. Whereas there are some stations where it would be, I would say, near an impossibility to have folks get off and have a real good bus circulator kind of system. So what we'll have to demonstrate to the FTA is with the money we have, we've gotten as far as we can to get the most ridership. And again, it's interesting to point out, but it's not just a ridership on the train. If there isn't good connectivity, people won't get on the train. If they know, though, they can get to a place like a Middle Street and they won't have to wait a long time for a bus, and they'll see that as a rapid, then that will be an incentive for them to actually get on the train. So we'll just have to make that case. Should that be the will of the board, the council, and the mayor, then we would try to make the best case we have. And as I say, they'll be happy to hear about a large contingency. they would be unhappy if there was so much more that we could have actually gotten to some logical next terminus.
And so maybe this question's actually better directed to Director Formby, but does the bus service have the capacity to handle the increased traffic load that would be generated by the rail unloading at Middle Street?
Well, not presently, but I mean, we also would need revised ridership numbers because a temporary termination at Middle Street will affect the ridership. So we need to know what to expect, and then we will have to make changes at the Middle Street terminal. So it'll be a different operation.
And the good news is that the DTS staff and the HART staff have been, on service planning, have been working. When we looked at the interim opening, possibly terminating at Aloha Stadium, we did a lot of the same kind of service examination so that we figured out how many buses we would need to take folks from that first 10 miles. So we've done, as Director Formby said, a lot of that kind of analysis. We just have to sort of get further granularity if now it's 15 miles instead of 10-mile terminus.
Yes. Mr. Louis Kwan.
Thank you. I understood that the mayor went on TV and he was, one of the things that he mentioned was because Senator Brian Schatz is on the Appropriations Committee for the U.S. Senate, and then we're going to have a new representative of the U.S. House of Representatives in the form of our chair, that there potentially could be availability of additional federal funds. I don't know who can answer that question, whether it's Director Formby, you, Dan, or anybody else, or Sam. What is the context for that? Is there any possibility for that? Or was that just conjecture?
Well, at the current time, anyway, the policy, and it's actually embedded in writing in the full funding grant agreement, is that they consider that it's the maximum amount of the grant is the 1.55 billion. Now that's in the current contract, so to say. There could be something that happens in the future, but the stance of late, meaning for now the past 10 years plus, anyway, for the FTA has been that the federal government comes forward with a full funding grant amount, and that is basically fixed, and that any variations either come in the form of additional monies from the local jurisdiction or, as we're going through now in the recovery process, a change to the scope which sizes the budget and the project.
Sam, do you have anything to add to that from your experience?
Not really, but I do think that it'll take a little bit of time. I mean, we're not going to be able to get the money instantly, but there's always options there. I mean, FTA is, of course, on the administrative side. The legislative side will decide if we're able to get the money over there.
So Sam, let me ask you this hypothetical. If the full funding grant agreement would have to be amended as a result of this, however the recovery plan is accepted, can the leg after that be considered another new start?
I wouldn't say a new start because it would have to go through the process again.
But so there is a possibility that once the FFGA is amended and that they agree to our de-scoping or reduction, that there may be access to additional federal funds. But that's something that we would have to contend with after everyone is happy with the FFGA amendment.
That's correct. That option's always there, but again, it goes through the legislative branch. So
that's right. Any other question, members? So now the process that has been laid out by both the mayor and the council chair, they seem to be in agreement that what we should do is we should proceed with the HART board probably having a special meeting to select an alternative. But of course, we are not the final decision maker on this. So then we would then forward that to the city council. They by resolution would either agree or disagree, but I assume if it's in line with what the chair says and the mayor says, they probably would be in agreement. Then it would come back and it would direct the HART staff to then negotiate with the FTA for an amendment to the full funding grant agreement. Would that be the correct scenario?
Well, that was not my impression, to be honest with you. I guess we're doing away with the working group if the mayor and the chair already agree. So we would develop the numbers as best we can, both on the cost and schedule, and make a recommendation. But I think the actual negotiation has to take place between the city. I don't think HART, correct me if I'm wrong, but I don't think that they didn't even exist. Oh, well, I guess they just did at that time.
Well, the full funding grant agreement is December 2012.
Right.
But you are correct, and that's been my contention, is
Yeah.
that the grantee is the city and county of Honolulu.
Correct.
But it is identified as through its agent, HART.
Right.
So if I guess part of the city council's resolution would have to be to authorize HART
Yes.
to continue to act as its agent. But absent that, I would assume it would require the city and county of Honolulu, whether that be by council resolution or whatever form that the FTA would feel comfortable with, that would have to make that decision unless the parameters are set forth in a resolution that comes back to us. Would that
agree.
be meet?
I agree with you. I think you're correct.
Okay.
Chair,
Yes.
if I could, Sam, respond to your question about the working group, because I've spoken with
Yeah.
both Chair Martin and the mayor. And I think you're correct. The chair's indicated his policy position, which he would take through a public hearing to the full council, and the mayor would probably testify at that council hearing. And then, of course, our board meetings are public as well. So by doing it through the council, the HART board, it's a fully public process. There's no separate working group that is not open to the public. So I think you take the policy indication by Chair Martin, and then the mayor wrote a letter yesterday, and you'll be receiving that, and I think you'll find that he's in line with the council on this.
Any other questions? I have one procedurally as to what's going on. So we do know that they've requested a recovery plan. And in the request for that recovery plan, we've also had drafts that are floating out there. And what was it that we were doing in May? Was it a budget refresh, or
Yes.
was it another risk refresh?
It was more like a risk refresh.
A risk refresh, because in my reading of, and I have a copy of it, it's the 2014 risk refresh. There was one done in 2012 prior to the full funding grant agreement.
Correct.
And there was one done in August of 2014. Well, it was July, but
No,
2014.
August. It came out in
August is when it
August,
transmitted it to HART. And it did not specify a recovery plan at that time, but it was a risk refresh.
Yes, it was.
One of the things that bothered me, Sam, quite candidly, is, we've always talked about P factors and so forth, and I just don't want us to be caught in the same situation again. And looking at this PMOC report, the 2014 risk refresh, they speak about betas. What are betas?
That's just a factor that they use themselves, the FTA.
So is it like the P factor? Does it give you, because these are like betas 40%, 50%, 80%, 100%. Would that
They're
be like?
similar, but they're not the same.
But they're similar. That gives you the probability of the confidence level of
Yeah,
those numbers?
Yeah, but did you want to say?
I was going to say, typically it's a risk factor, so they'll attribute a certain percentage of, or a certain weight of risk with the betas, and then those all get run in these various scenarios to come
Right.
up with that probability calculation.
And the reason I raise this is because I want us to understand clearly whether you call it a beta, a P factor, whatever, our numbers on Middle Street. And the reason is because in the August or the 2014 risk refresh, one of the things that struck me as I read this thing so many times is that we had an upper bound 100% of 7.586212. Does that seem to say back in 2014, somehow we felt that we would be at probably the $7.5 billion figure. And notwithstanding this figure, we went to both the legislature and city council, legislature at 910 million increase, and then we went to the city council at 1.2 billion and not a penny more, because they keep, so when we do this, can we get to another 100% figure to get us to Middle Street, so that when we go to the FTA, they can be comfortable with the figures that we've come up with, that we in fact are in that budget, I guess for lack of a better description, that we are building to budget versus budget to build?
Yes, I would hope that we could come up with something like that. The 2014 predates me, and did you say that was HART's projection?
This is PMOC.
Oh, that's FTA's. Okay,
Yeah,
that's
this
FTA's.
is, well, this is the final risk refresh report.
Yeah. So,
And I also have the FTA, I mean, our HART's one, and I don't think we were that far off in terms of the charts. I think we used basically the same, a lot of the same charts. But notwithstanding that, the fact is that they had calculated almost to the, not quite to the penny, but pretty close to where all of you came up before we did the June 8th hearing. And then June 8th, we were at 7.9, but that's because we had forgotten, we had not added in, is a better way of putting it, the financing charge of 370 million. But we were very close to the figures that the PMOC came up with. So I guess given that as background, they seem to be estimating fairly accurately. So I would hope that the one thing that we do as we negotiate further with them, assuming the council gives HART the authority, is that we recognize their figures, and also the fact that we've got to be fairly close to whatever they may or may not say is that point. And I don't know in the recent risk refresh where they are to take the whole airport segment out.
Maybe the more on point. These were all estimates on probabilities and betas, as I said. The good news is that we will actually be able to give you that delta in what it's going to cost for at least the contracted amount for up to Middle Street, because tomorrow we actually have the airport guideway and station group best and final offer coming into the office. It'll be reviewed over the next couple weeks to make sure that everything is correct, but we won't have to estimate to Middle Street. We're going to actually have a number.
But Dan, that's assuming that we don't have any additional addendums out there.
Yeah.
And I'm assuming that we've taken care of all the HECO issues up until Middle Street.
No, I just meant that in terms of the base of the actual contracted amount, we will actually know, and then I think we'll be looking at a significant amount of contingency for those other issues.
And I guess the other question, which has always been an issue with the FTA and the PMOC, is our contingency amount.
Yes.
And would we be at 20%, 15%? Do we have any indication as to what contingency we have to carry if it's to Middle Street?
We'd have to talk to them.
Not specifically to Middle Street, but overall, they said they were looking for more than the 15% that we're carrying right now.
Right.
They had indicated they want to see more than that.
Would that be
also,
about 20%?
That's what they would prefer.
Okay.
And the other point, too, as far as additional cost, as Director Formby pointed out, that there may be some changes that we have to make at Middle Street to accommodate the buses at the transit center there.
Well, Director Formby can probably speak better to it, but there's these crossover things.
Right.
And do you have to have a different terminus and new power? Is it a power supply? If I remember.
Substation.
Substation.
Right.
So those are things that I guess what we need to have an indication of is that, and hopefully we will schedule a public hearing, a public meeting for that specific purpose. But what we'd like to be pretty sure of is that the numbers are within the budget.
Right.
Because it's no use for us to go forward with Middle Street and then as our executive director says, and we go to FTA and says, oh, by the way, we have to drop a couple of stations because we miscalculated. So we can't do that, not on this recovery mode.
I think given the direction that I anticipate the board's going to give us, I think we'll be able to get some pretty good numbers now.
Yes.
Members, any other questions?
No,
Yeah.
but Chair, I would like to clarify because I appreciate you, referencing the August 2014, and I think it's a final risk refresh report. But I believe you got this for the first time in 2016.
Yes.
And these were not made available to the board at the time back in 2014, and obviously they're very helpful for us now. But what it really highlights to us is that when it comes to estimating the number that you're going to take to the FTA, we hope we don't have this huge delta that ends up proving us wrong. We'd like to make sure we have every single thing in there. And Sam, you know it better than we do. You've done this before. We just hope when you bring us that number for Middle Street, it's all-inclusive, everything's in, including West Side utilities, which may not be completely quantified yet. If not, then a high contingency. Everything, so that when we get that number, we know what you take to the FTA is the best we can give them. And I'm confident you're going to do that, because you know exactly what we're talking about.
Well, not only that, Director Formby, I can tell you that we've worked collaboratively with the PMO, certainly over the past year, and they will have a look at this, well, certainly ahead of time, and we'll have their opinion.
Right.
So.
Yeah. Thank you, Sam.
Yeah.
Sam, just to give us an indication, we now know that the FTA is not saying if you don't build to the FFGA, you pay us all back. So how unique or unusual is that situation from your experience?
From my experience, I haven't seen it often, but they have given us a number of examples. They sent us a communication that indicated in certain areas. And the only people that I saw in the example that was New Jersey, when they started to do what's called the HART project up there. And New Jersey did have to reimburse them for the costs that they put out. But other than that, there's like 4 or 5 other ones that they didn't have to pay back anything.
Right.
Of all the New Start type projects?
Yes.
And the ARC project was actually, I think, an outright cancellation after the fact, rather than a modification. Again, the FTA has used the phrase along many times as their partners, and where we've tried to remedy our issues, but things have overtaken us, they've now expressed that willingness to work with us on the best plan we can get for the money we have available.
Members, any other questions? This is discussion. If not, okay, we'll move on to the next item on the agenda, and that is the adoption of fiscal year 2017 business plan. It is you, Dan.
So the plan was presented by Ron Tober by teleconference at the last meeting. We did not receive any changes or alterations from any members of the board. So we thank Ron Tober for his hard work in putting together the business plan and would recommend that the business plan be adopted as presented.
You know, Dan, my comment is that, this was something that we all discussed way prior to all of the recent events happening. So I understand that we have to adopt the business plan, but it seems like it's kind of disingenuous to adopt a business plan that we know is no longer the relevant business plan. So is there something we can do about that? Because, clearly, it's not what he's representing, but at the time that we all participated in it, it was. We thought that 6.8 and all these other factors, but now this isn't the way it is. So what should we do?
If the board would like, we can engage Mr. Tober to update the business plan to reflect what new direction we've taken. He started this process many months ago, and as you said, things have changed quite a bit. If that's the will of the board, I know we can go back to Mr. Tober and then say, given the new realities, or certainly maybe the new direction that may be taken in the next several weeks by the board, the council, and the mayor, we could ask him to do an update.
Well, for myself personally, I don't like passing anything that we know is just not relevant anymore, because it becomes part of our record. But I understand that this is something like a snapshot in time.
Yes.
But given that it's such a major snapshot that we have now come across, I find that I'm very uncomfortable with it. But members, any thoughts or considerations on it? Yes.
I totally agree with you, Madam Chair. I think it was based on certain assumptions, but the assumptions have changed, and so it really would make sense to have it re-looked at, as opposed to adopting it in its present form.
Is there a legal or charter requirement to adopt the business plan, or was that just past practice, Cindy?
Ms. Fajii.
But then things are going to constantly keep changing. And then does it make sense to have him even work on updating this until we decide what to do? Middle Street, not?
No, I think that was what we were thinking
Yes.
of, is that we
Yes.
would wait. Because this is such a major event that's going to happen very shortly. So it's up to the board. We can vote on it with the understanding that this is what it was whenever, but it's going to be recorded as us voting on it today.
We're just checking to see if there's a charter requirement. If there's not, perhaps you'd want to just defer. Or in the alternative, I could offer that we could put some language at the beginning of the business plan, right at the very beginning, that says this is being adopted with the understanding that it will be updated shortly, so that you have on the record at that snapshot that.
Well, I think if we have to adopt it, we can adopt it with that language, but I think if we don't have to adopt it, I would prefer that we wait. And I don't know how the rest of the board members feel, but.
It was my recollection that it was a best practice actually recommended by Ron Tober before HART was even existed, to have a business plan coincident with the passage of the operating capital budgets. So unless Corporation Counsel contradicts me, I think it's your prerogative to defer.
Any indications?
How much does this business plan cost us?
I'd have to get you a figure.
Is it significant?
I'd get you the figure.
Okay.
Yes.
It's several thousands of dollars for his work to put it together, but I don't have to get you the exact figure.
Yeah, Deputy Corporation Counsel Randall Ishikawa, it is not within the charter. It may be within the board policies and rules, but we have not reviewed those for that issue.
Okay. What's the sense of the board?
Defer.
Defer?
I move to defer.
Move to
Second.
Before we vote, Ms. Iwasa.
Thank you, Natalie Wassa, for the record, and thank you for considering a deferral on this. I don't know if you've actually read this. I mean, there's so many documents you have to go through, but this plan is rife with errors, typos, words that are incorrect. I also wanted to just point out a few specific things. On page 36, there's a $100,000 math error. And then in page 18, it talks about the GET collections, and if you'll recall, late last fall, there was the issue about $100 million being the shortfall.
Right.
And so I had done a schedule, and I gave that to the board as testimony, clarifying how the $100 million kind of disappeared when they did the October report to the City Council. So at that time, I recall that the $100 million was a question from you, Chair, and it was stated that, no, that's taken care of in the new projected GET. So if that is the case, why is it being mentioned here again as still continuing to be a shortfall? On page 19, it talks about financial reporting. I would ask that that you consider adding additional review. I don't know, there are so many errors and things that I have questions on, and the financial reports that are given. I think that there's somewhere along the way there has to be somebody who is in charge of just reviewing the reports that you're given to mitigate these math mistakes and inconsistencies. And then a couple comments on 23, 24, and 33. It talks about things such as developing procedures for becoming an operating agency, policy on splitting the fares between the rail and the bus, developing a multimodal system. And with the consideration that the Honolulu Charter Commission now is going forward, and there may be a question on the ballot, if I may just a few more seconds, that potentially the whole thing about HART being the operating agency, that stuff may not be applicable at all. So maybe that's a consideration for an update to this plan, but I just wanted to put that out there. And then lastly, regarding the federal funding, and I'm not sure which page this is on, but I had the question of $20 million in federal funding. I sent you folks the schedule. And I just talked to Mr. Grabowskis about this. I'm really concerned about this because it does not match up with the audits. I've taken a look at all the city audits prior to HART's formation and the audits after. And I got information from Michael McGrain that it was received in a period from March to June 2011. So when I look at that audit, the most that came in was 13 million of other revenue. I am wondering now whether that money somehow got posted to another city fund. And I ask you to look at this very closely, because if that's the case, then the city owes HART money. Now, I don't know whether that's the case. I'm just raising this as a question because based on the documents I've seen, that money just doesn't appear to be in the transit fund. And not saying that anybody is doing anything funny, but you know, maybe there was a mistake made somewhere along the way. So I ask you to take a look at that, and please defer the adoption of this plan.
Thank you, Ms. Ross. Any questions, members? Thank you very much. So members, what is the sentiment of the board?
Move to defer.
There's a motion to defer. Any second on that motion?
Second.
There's a second. Members, any further discussion? If not, do we have unanimous consent to defer this report?
Yes.
Yes.
And members, I think in addition to the deferral, then we're going to have to ask that the business plan be done at another time. And I think unless there's any opposition, why don't we wait until we have contact with FTA and the recovery plan, and then we'll have a better sense. Thank you. Thank you, members. Now, members, we're on the next item, agenda item 9, resolution 26-18, which is the adopting the operating and capital budget for fiscal year 2017. This is Diane Arakaki.
Good afternoon. I'm Diane Arakaki, your Chief Financial Officer, and I'm here, as I have been annually, to discuss the budget. As you know, we need to adopt the budget by July 1st, and for fiscal year 2017. So I will proceed. In summary, I'll provide a summary and then go into some background and give you some history on how we got to where we are today and the decision before you with respect to adopting the budget for next fiscal year. So, most recently, Council has adopted Bills 18 through 20 relative to HART's fiscal year 2017 operating and capital budgets that are in your packets and that have been posted. By way of background, in September last year, your board's finance committee was presented with staff's request for a budget and reported out from the finance committee the operating and capital budgets, and transmitted and requested staff transmit it to the mayor and city council for their review in November, which was done. Since then, council has been reviewing our budgets, and in April of this year, we as staff have presented to you and council an updated reappropriation request, given that we formulate our budgets in the summer. We come to you in September each year, which is just barely a quarter into the new fiscal year, the current fiscal year, in anticipation for the upcoming year, so we're a full 9 months ahead of schedule. So that's why we come back to you in the spring and say, based on what we know in April, this is where we think we will be with respect to awarding of contracts and the like starting July 1 of the upcoming fiscal year. So that's what we did and we've done in the past, and came to you and then passed on to council reappropriation requests for mostly capital projects. City Council has completed their review on June 1st and approved our budget, and what I'm going to, we're currently waiting on the mayor's action on the council adopted bills. And what I'd like to do is summarize the differences and changes council has made to our budget. And that's where we are right here on this slide. The differences are, in summary, council has reduced our budget in the personal services area, labor costs area, and increased it in others for a net difference and reduction of $463,000. Current expenses have been reduced by $1.59 million, and a transit mitigation fund, and that's for adverse impact to businesses as a result of project construction, have added $2 million to our budget for a net decrease overall to our FY17 request of $54,333. Gross reductions are $2.13 million. As I mentioned earlier, $2 million are added for the transit mitigation fund by the council, has been added, and $110,000 for additional 2 positions for HART board support, and other current expenses of $23,000, which includes an increase of $20,000 for additional OLELO cost coverage and another $3,000 for room rental for your meetings for next fiscal year. On the next page, it is again a detailed, more detail on the budget, the net budget reduction of $463,000. You will see here that council has approved reducing planning and engineering and project manager positions in our labor budget, and added $110,000 for board administrative support. Operating budget costs, these are the impacts to these reductions. The equivalent of 6 positions will be reduced as a result of the decrease in our labor costs by council. Potential impacts are to project controls, quality assurance, core systems, design and construction, planning, permitting, right-of-way, and budget and finance. And it also limits our use of project revenues to $6.831 billion. We have an option. We currently have 10 vacancies of HART staff. You could charge the CEO and HART staff to achieve the savings through strategic hiring and freezes in order to come and live within this limit. On the operating side, current expenses, council has approved a budget that includes a reduction of $806,833 in rent, primarily for our office space here at Ali'i Place. They have also reduced our budget by $750,000. Travel is pretty much cut in half, and reduced our parking amounts. They've added, as I mentioned before, $23,000 for additional OLELO costs and room rental, for a net change, net change in operating budget less the transit mitigation fund of $1.59 million. And again, the $2 million for the transit mitigation fund, bringing the overall an increase of 408 to this portion, of our budget. So the impacts of current expense reductions are HART would need to get out of or do something with respect to the 11th floor lease, or relocate and disrupt our work, or we could co-locate with some of our consultants in order to live within this, or live with this reduction and implement it. Our legal services of $1 million, which is what we asked for, which is now at $250,000, I think we could live with, barring any significant legal action and needing to defend us on lawsuits. Pooled vehicle parking, it reduces by approximately 1/3 of HART's vehicles and transport staff, and limited options for lower parking fees, as we don't control what the parking fees are in this building. But I think we might be able to make it up in other parts of the budget. Travel, the impact is that, potential impact is that we will not be able to have as much travel for quality assurance, safety inspection, and to go to FTA meetings. So these are potential impacts of the reductions to our current expense budget. Back to the 11th floor lease to consultants. Let's see. We could potentially sublet parts of our 11th floor or parts of our space to our consultants, thereby offsetting the reduction. That's something that hasn't been finalized, but it's a possibility. Let's see. I think this is, should we need to engage counsel for a lawsuit that we don't any lawsuits that we don't currently have pending with us, we would probably need, should that occur, we would probably need to go back for a supplemental budget for legal services. And other requested budget changes are our current cash flow estimates, GO bond financing, placing GO bond financing, it says here in late spring and now currently or potentially in late summer next year. So we currently have $10 million in debt financing in the budget, and given that we are going to be issuing debt later than what we thought we were when we originally proposed a $10 million budget request for debt service, we could possibly reduce that amount from 10 to 5, based on what we know today versus what we knew when we put the budget together last summer. So that said, that's the operating budget. CIP changes, this is what the council adopted at $2.5 billion for all our capital costs. This is a detail. As you recall, we went to you and to them with an additional just under $183 million, excluding any capital reappropriations. There's a slight difference between, you'll note, under the HART board line total for capital of $2.53 billion, and on the far right-hand column, bottom line, $2.15 billion. And that difference is due to the fact that you all adopt a capital budget on an annual basis, the council adopts capital budgets on a biannual basis, and the difference is $300 million, which is the middle column there. So this slide articulates the differences between what staff is requesting for you to adopt today as a capital budget versus what the council approved on June 1st. So, summary of Bill 19 and remaining packages, which is our capital budget, is the airport segment. Remaining packages are capped budgetarily by appropriation. Airport segment, city center segment, Pearl Highlands, garage and terminal are appropriated separately and capped at bid solicitation midpoint. Of course, this may all change in light of the more recent discussion with respect to Middle Street. But as of yesterday, this is where we, and as of council's adopted budget for us, that's what they have adopted. Project adjustment account may be used for access and contract packages, and the city council approved by resolution requiring any
Diane, hold on. Members, if you're looking for the slide, it's in this folder. It's in the HART section. It's the second, and it's under HART supporting documents. Where it may be confusing is because it's November 24, 2015. Oh, that's not it.
But this only goes to page 11 and you're on 12.
Yeah. Sorry.
Yeah, this is not
this
the
is
This is not the one.
no, this is that was what you're looking at is the original presentation.
So where is
sorry,
this one?
is
Because
sorry.
we're trying
Did
to-
you not get copies?
Usually we take
This
notes
was a
on these
kind
things
of
and I don't find it.
Excuse me.
I don't see it anywhere.
Sorry, didn't make it in your packets. It was kind of a late thing after we briefed, so please excuse me.
We were okay up until a certain point.
Okay, sorry. This was a late edition. Did we have copies made? No? Okay.
Keep going.
Keep going? Okay. So what you're looking at in your packet, forgive me, is sorry for the snafu, I'm kind of in transition. That is what was originally submitted. So what I'm showing to you here right now is where we are today. And sorry for the confusion and you're not getting this. It was a little late coming for me, so I apologize. So this is summarizing the package that the council adopted and the significant changes versus what you're looking at.
So Diane, maybe while you're continuing, can someone just make us black and white
Yes.
copies so then when we ask questions, we can
Yes,
have it
we
in
can
front
do
of us?
Sorry for the confusion. So the significant change versus what was submitted, which you have there, that council has adopted, is that should there be an excess in contract, what we want to award contracts at versus what's in the budget, if it exceeds $100,000 or 10%, whichever is less, of each of the contract amounts, which I briefed some of you on over the last couple of days, which it will get to you in a moment, in the detail on the, for any of the capital project budgets, it will require council approval. And as the resolution is worded, and I pointed out to some of you when I briefed you over the last few days, HART staff will return to you, the board, prior to going to the council with prior to award of any contract, if it exceeds 10% or $100,000 of what we have budgeted, whichever is less. So that's what this one means. Council also established an account at $3,000, project adjustment account, and they have also limited the use of the total project revenues to $6.831 billion. The impacts of Bill 19 is award of the Airport Guideway and Station Group contract is in final review currently. The budget is at midpoint of bid solicitation range. Council approval by resolution would be required if award is greater, as I said before, but within the bid solicitation range. Bid prices are good up to 180 days from submittal, and again, we're limited to the use of revenues to offset FTA contingency requirements. Bill 20 is geo-bonding, is about geo-bonding, and before council approves any permanent geo-bond obligations, it requires the bill that council adopted on June 1st requires that an updated final financial plan for the full funding grant agreement be submitted to the council for their approval prior to the submittal to the FTA. So I think what they mean there is before term geo bonds are issued. So as you recall, it's another item coming up later about tax-exempt commercial paper. The Bill 20 that they passed refers to term bonds, which is different than tax-exempt commercial paper, which is 270-day paper, although both of them are forms of geo-bonded debt. So today, where we're at is I've reviewed and summarized the differences between the budget that was submitted to council and what council has approved on June 1st. And what is before you today is to consider those and ultimately to adopt an operating and capital budget. And I'm open to any questions you might have about the budget or any changes made.
Members, any questions? Well, I have a comment, Diane. When we were going over this originally, I had specifically requested that a line item in the budget be created to address those items that are for the board.
Yes.
And I don't see it in here. So
yes. And
if we pass this resolution, and members, as you know, we have two specific individuals that are assigned to Cindy for assistance, and that's part of council has actually enacted that as part of their budget. In addition, we have a pay increase for Cindy, And we have also $20,000 for Olelo, which is for the board's use, because we anticipated we would be doing more meetings, and also $3,000 in the event that we had to rent facility. So the question, Diane, is since that is not in this resolution, I would ask that the board members, when we pass this resolution, specifically amend it so that the board items are delineated and that the board has control over at least those specific monetary items. Members, any other questions? So as it now stands, Diane, with the budget as we're, wait a minute, do we have to go into executive session on some of those items on the budget? We do, right? Okay.
Chair, can I ask a
Yes.
general question? So the reso that we're doing right now is for both operating and capital budgets for fiscal year 2017. So one of the questions that I have, and I think the chair probably has the answer because she was at the council meeting and I was not present, was that to the extent the capital budget has airport at a figure that may be less than what is revealed tomorrow, Chair, can you help the rest of us understand how we're protected by the budget?
Yes, so the way that the council explained it, because I had asked for a friendly amendment so that the fund that Diane referred to that has $3,000, under the $6.8 billion operating budget scheme, there's $130 million that is considered to be contingency. So I had originally asked the council to put that $130 million into that special fund that they created, because if we went over, the concern was whether we act by resolution or we had to go by bill. In other words, because we were asking for more money, arguably we could be required to go by bill to comply with the way that they are looking at it. The council made it very clear that they were giving HART the maximum flexibility, but they wanted notification. So they said that by resolution, we could move funds from contingency, or what Councilmember Kobayashi said, from any of the 3 different sources of funds that we had out there. We could do it in one resolution, moving it from one source into this special account, and they're out. And they anticipated the resolution to just go by in less than 30 days. And that would then permit us to have those bid amounts stand firm. Because the question is, if we have to go by bill, the bid amounts would probably expire from the time it's open to the time we realize what it is. So we needed the flexibility to do that. The council was not willing, just so that we're clear, the council was not willing to simply say, HART, you can spend whatever you want. That's why these bills look like the way they do, which is they took but they took HART's numbers. That's the thing. They took our numbers. So the this is on the capital side. So it was 820 for airport, 866 for city center. So, but the problem is, I think we can all agree that we assume that airport will be in excess of 820 million. It will be more than 100,000. So we would have exceeded it. So that's the way it's anticipated, but we would have to go by resolution. Yes.
And Chair, so I can understand, so once we open the bids and the BAFO and analyze them, if there are in excess of 820, you know, I've got that catch-22 that I can't announce an award amount until an award is made. What would be the direction, or what's your understanding? Is it a conditional? This may be a Corporation Council question too, but is it a conditional award conditioned on a resolution passed by the City Council or the board, or I'm not exactly sure what mechanism?
I think that that's one of the reasons why the whole issue that this board is going to have to first determine, and that's why we will move into executive session, is what does the charter really provide in terms of the authority of HART and the budget process. And that's separate and apart from the political considerations that the City Council has taken a very firm position as to how HART operates and the funding. So after, if no one else has any general questions of Diane, I'm going to ask that we move into an executive session to receive the advice of our attorneys on the issue of what are our rights in terms of the budget itself under the charter and under the law. Any other questions? If not, members, may I have a motion to go into executive for the reasons that I stated earlier? So that's a sufficient motion, right? Second?
Second.
Second by Ms. Pagii. So members, we are going to be in executive session. Members of the public, our apologies, but this is a matter that clearly requires us to consult with our attorneys. Members, we are back in session. So are there any testifiers on resolution number 2016-18? This is adopting the operating and capital budget for fiscal year 2017. No? We are not able to go into decision-making at this time. So let us go to the next item, and that is, so we'll defer the decision-making on this particular item till we have quorum. The next item is item number 10 on the agenda, Resolution 2016-19, which is adopting the 6-year capital program for fiscal year 2017 to 2022. Diane.
Yes, thank you. Diana Arakaki, Chief Financial Officer. As you all know, we annually update this plan, and it has been intended, and so is the current draft before you, represents the budget appropriation amount by fiscal year that staff is able to encumber, and that's what this represents.
Members, any questions? Members, I will share with you that I informed Diane. The charter requires that the executive director prepare and maintain a 6-year capital project for the authority. I informed her that I would not be able to support, with all due respect, the executive director's 6-year capital program. And if you look at it, it is Exhibit A, so it is the reverse side of the appropriation. You will note that everything is in fiscal year 2017, and everything else is, as I say, tamagoed, which is zeroed out for the remaining 5 years of the 6 years. I do not believe that that's the intent when the charter requires that we come up with, or we approve a 6-year capital program for the authority. What this has done is it's put everything in the first year and zeroes it all out for the rest. So I think that what this is not a, and this is not a budget, this is a capital program. And for that reason, I informed Diane that for myself, I would not be able to support this because I do not believe that this complies with the intent of the charter. Having said that, I do realize that this may have been the way it's been handled in the past, but notwithstanding, I do not believe that this is the intent of the charter itself. Any other comments or questions? Dan, do you wish to say anything?
No, just had you given direction to staff on how you wanted this to then be presented?
Because this is a program, I expected to see, like, for example, let's do one that's very obvious. City Center Section Guideway and Station Group, $866 million, right? You're not doing that in this year. You'll be lucky if you can even issue that contract in this year, which I don't think you're going to do. So, or Pearl Highlands, $258 million. It is not something that you would see in this year. So the problem I have is that my understanding of what a 6-year capital program is going to look like is you're going to give it your best estimate as to what you think every year would break out to, for example, airport, 820 million. You may not even finish that off in the 6-year period.
Right.
But it definitely, in my opinion, doesn't look like this.
Yeah.
This is like taking the capital CIP and plopping it all in 1 year, which is not a 6-year program.
It makes it look like we're done with construction in 2019.
Yep. So I'm looking at Corey, so we can present that in the, given the changes that may come as a result of the recovery plan, we can try to, we will retool this with new estimates then along those lines.
And I think it's, though it's not certain, and this is just a program issue, that it's something that we should see and the public should be looking at, that would be expended in each of those years for the 6 years. And it may not be that we anticipate finishing, well, I don't think we're going to finish the city center. We may not even start it in that period of time. But you know, I think that the public anticipated getting an assessment as to where we would be every year.
Understood. And even if we had done it in that method, based on events that have transpired as recently as today, it would be totally changing anyway.
Right. We would probably defer it anyway.
Yeah.
But that's the way, that's my opinion on this, members, so anybody can.
So if the board chooses to defer that, then we would defer it and like the business plan until after the final action on the recovery plan, and then present that to you?
Yeah, because I believe that there is no time limit on this as well, right? So members, do you have any comments on that? It's my 000.
No, I agree with you on that, and I do want to make a clarification later, but I do agree with you on the capital plan, the 6-year capital plan.
So is there any member of the public that wishes to speak on this specific issue? If not, members, can we have a motion on the 6-year capital program to defer and to have Diane or the staff redo it in light of the upcoming events that we have, and also that it looks like a 6-year capital program?
So moved.
Second.
And second. Any discussion, members? If not, do we have unanimous consent on this?
Yes.
Thank you very much. Thank you. So going back, since Director Formby has been kind enough to join us. Members, we are going to go into decision-making now on Resolution 2016-18, which is adopting the operating and capital budgets for fiscal year 2017. Members, is there a motion on this?
So moved.
What are we moving?
Moving the adoption of fiscal year 2017 operating and capital budgets.
As presented.
As presented in Resolution 2016-18.
Second.
There's a second. Discussion, members? Now, remember, I would just like to propose a friendly amendment, because I believe when we were discussing this, I had asked that the actual budget reflect the board's budget, and we were going to incorporate that in it as a, so if everyone would agree to that friendly amendment. Do you have any objection to that?
No objection.
Okay, and then you put in the appropriate language to that effect. Anything else, members? Members, we do know that this budget the resolution looks very similar to what the City Council passed. And I believe another friendly amendment may be the statement that that the board has taken into consideration and input, but this is still the board's budget. Is there a second to that friendly amendment?
I will second that. Well,
You accept the
you
friendly
make that motion? Who's going to make the
You
motion?
made the motion. You made the motion. So I'm looking
No,
at you.
I made the motion to...
So it's a preface to your motion.
Okay, so
Right.
you want me to accept your amendment?
My friendly amendment,
I
my second friendly
I
amendment.
accept your second friendly amendment.
Any other discussion? If not, members, do we have unanimous consent?
Yes.
Thank you very much. Okay, we're now moving on to, see, we don't want you to think you can cruise on your last.
Yeah, right.
It's not his last one.
Okay. 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 So we're going to have some issues with the quorum. So if, with your approval, members, the other major issue for, there are two issues for vote. So one that I think would be, no, that's not going to be quick. It's not going to be quick. Oh, no, no, wait, no. The vote would be the extension of the deadline to evaluate the executive director and CEO, and there's an actual board, there's an actual letter in your packet of information. Any discussion, any comments from the public, because we're going to have to vote to accept this. If not, members, any discussion? Can we have a motion first then on accepting the letter?
So moved.
So moved. We've already kind of voted on this in Human Resources. Second?
Second, Ivan's not here. Oh, there he is.
What?
Ivan?
Yes.
This is on the letter that we voted on. This is extend Dan's evaluation. Sure. So, okay. Any further discussion, members? If not, do we have unanimous consent on accepting that?
We do.
Thank you. And now let's go back to the other thing that we would need a vote on, which is item number 11, which is the change order. Establishment of a provisional sum to dispose of contaminated material, West Oahu, Farrington Highway Guideway, Wolf contract number CT-HRT-10H0137. Mike Yoshida.
Chair, just a question. I know that you had a question of quorum. I don't know, the presentation is a little longer than 5 minutes, so did we want to try to offer an abridged presentation, and if that's satisfactory for a vote, or how did you want to handle that?
I'm going to have to go onto this call in about 3 minutes, so.
We can go forward with it and hold
the vote. Yeah.
Okay.
Because I've reviewed the written report.
Okay.
Okay, so please proceed. Introduce yourself.
Yeah, good afternoon, Chair Anabusa, board members, Dan. My name is Michael Yoshida. I'm the project manager for the Wolf and KHG Guideways. Sitting next to me is Deputy Director of Construction West, Kainani Kraut, and she has asked that I present this change order to you. I've asked Kai to sit close by to help me with questions I may not be able to readily answer. Today, I am requesting the board's approval for a change order for the removal and disposal of contaminated soil along the Farrington Highway median from Fort Weaver Road to Waikele Stream in Waipahu. The change order is a bilateral change in the amount of $1.875 million, and payment will be made on a force account basis. As all available guideway alignment fill areas were full, federal, state, and local laws require that soil samples are tested prior to disposal off-site. As you can see from the red arrows, we took samples and tested the soil approximately every 100 feet. This slide shows the test results highlighted in yellow. The offending contaminant, petroleum hydrocarbons, range from 3,400 to 4,200 milligrams per kilogram, which is well over the acceptable maximum of 500 milligrams per kilogram. There are 3 options available to us for disposal of contaminated material. The first option is to reuse the soil within HART work area, excluding HDOT right-of-way, since they will only accept soil that is deemed non-detectable, or in other words, clean. Since, as I mentioned earlier, there were not any available locations within the guideway area that would accommodate fill, this option was not available to us. The second option is to reuse the soil off-site. The results of our testing exceeded the Tier 1 EAL for unrestricted use, and commercial industrial use CI level is 1,000 milligrams per kilogram. As I mentioned, our test was up at the 3,400 to 4,200 mark. So the last option, which became our only option, is to dispose of the soil at a disposal facility. Our contract position on this issue is that the contractor will be paid for removal and disposal of contaminated material as a change order. And in addition to that, as I mentioned earlier, we're going to be paying for this as a force account. Since the volume of material is an estimate, payment through force account would allow that HART is paying a fair and equitable price. So this last slide gives you a breakdown of the work scope and the estimated price. The first grouping represents the amount of soil that needs to be trucked. So we've got roughly, our estimate is 15,000 cubic yards. We estimate that a 15-yard truck would be used. More than likely it'd be filled to 10 yards. So we anticipate 1,500 truckloads. The next item down talks to the cost per load. And what we have within the contract is a $75 built-in cost. We project that the cost for moving contaminated material is $196, so the net difference is $121. So the cost then becomes $181,500 plus GET tax, $20,000, and so the total cost is $202,000. Below that is the dumping cost or disposal costs. So we estimate that the disposal costs are going to be $48 a ton, roughly 18 tons per load, again 1,500 loads, so that works out to $1,296,000. The grand total after taxes for that becomes $1.84 million, and we took it up to 1.875 in anticipation that there may be some extra.
1.64.
Oh, I'm sorry. Thanks, Dan. So that's our presentation on contaminated materials.
And if I may just, because there was a question earlier that you may not have heard, Mike, because it's a provisional sum,
yes.
We're not handing this amount of money over to Kiewit. It's actually reimbursed on an as-cost and as expended basis. So the additional monies, that the couple $100,000 there, if we don't have additional truckloads, we would not be spending that money. It's an up to amount, but it's not an amount that has to go out the door completely.
Mike, you know, on your spreadsheet, why are you estimating 1,500 truckloads if each truck has a capacity of 15 cubic yards and it's 15,000 cubic yards? That's 1,000 estimated truckloads. So I don't understand the math.
I think it was just a way of ensuring that the trucks are, or the beds are not overly full, so they wouldn't be spilling on the highways as they're going to the disposal sites. This is well under the full capacity of the trucks. And this is contaminated material, so it needs to be protected and carefully trucked.
Okay, thank you. It's behind.
Members, any other questions? No? No? No other questions?
You can have use mine. No, it's okay.
Do you have a question?
Oh, I was trying to get the PowerPoint. So yeah, I do. I want to follow up on Barbara Armentrout's question. Were you here when she asked her question earlier today? She asked the difference between the total figure 1.8 and the 1.6 or whatever the lower number was?
I think Director Formby, what she was doing was she was not adding the two numbers.
Oh, that's true. Yeah.
As I recall,
Yeah.
I was watching it upstairs.
Okay.
And so she had forgotten. I think she forgot the trucking cost.
Okay, so you disagree with her interpretation of the numbers?
It's yeah, only because she forgot one of the major components.
Okay, good.
Any other questions, members? Thank you very much. Are there any members of the public who'd like to speak to this? Yes, Natalie. This is going to require a vote, so take public testimony at this time.
Thank you, Natalie Wassa, for the record. Thank you for your questions on this, because the very first thing I noticed about this was the 15 cubic yards divided into 15,000 would be 1,000 truckloads. And so I think, and with respect to Barbara's question as well, I think this goes to the issue of presentation and clarification on what the numbers actually mean. So for example, on the number of truckloads, I would, notate somewhere in here that you anticipate only filling them up to 1,000 cubic yards. And then making another line here, so you have the trucking cost and you have the disposal fees, so putting a total estimated cost. And then the rounding number, which is about 32,000, and then coming up with the total request, just so that it's so much easier for people to understand. And I'm glad I wasn't the only one who had questions about this. The presentation can make a big difference on time and everything else, so thank you.
Thank you, Ms. Iwasa. Any questions of Ms. Iwasa? Mike, I also think that it isn't part of this that when you're measuring the 1,500 cubic yards, that's actually compressed soil. So that when you remove it, soil, and that's something I've learned all along, is that it becomes looser and it takes up more space because there's air. So is that all taken into account to why you think that there's going to be, besides the fact that you're reducing it to 10, which is probably 10 cubic yards, which is probably accounting for the fact that there's a differential in between what is the soil in the ground and what is the soil when it's removed?
Yes, absolutely. I think you bring up a very good point. Something that I had learned from my engineers just recently, that there is two types of soil when you put it into a truck, compacted and the non-compacted.
I know.
So thanks for that clarification.
Anything else, members? If not, we've taken public testimony. Do we have a motion on this change order?
Move to approve.
Second? Yes.
As part of the discussion, Madam Chair, just out of an abundance of caution, I just want to make a disclosure that in my private life, I have been negotiating with PVT, which is the landfill company here. So I know you need 6 votes. So you probably need my vote, so somebody needs to pass on my disclosure being okay for me to vote.
You're negotiating with them, but you don't have a financial interest in PVT, do you?
No.
Oh, I think that's the interest, that's the conflict. That would be the conflict, this kind of personal financial interest. Would you agree, Cor? Yeah. I don't think you have a financial interest. And then PVT also presents a very unique situation for us because they're the only ones that would take it. Though I don't, sometimes I think Wamanala Gulch takes everything. That's my issue. That's just me editorializing. So anything else, members? If not, do we have unanimous consent on this?
Yes.
Yes. Thank you very much. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you.
I got a 15-minute reprieve.
Oh.
So it came pretty much.
Members, we have Council Member Kimberly Pine with us, who is asked to to speak on the issue of, I think it's the Middle Street option. You probably heard about it. So we will take you out of order. Welcome, Councilmember Pine. Thank you for coming.
Thank you, Chairwoman. Now I know how you felt when you heard about all of our crazy amendments and you ran over. I was just at a transportation meeting and I heard a lot of important people gave their opinion on the various options that you have available or that was presented to you. And I just want to represent the voice of the little people on the council and the people of my district that are just humble citizens that have perhaps another perspective on this particular issue. In the transportation meeting just now, that's still going on, I was presented the different options. And I don't like any of them. For the reason that I feel that we're making a decision with a lack of information. Every time you eliminate one station, it represents a number that we need to consider. It represents ridership. We're eliminating 8 stations or so, or 7 or 8 stations at the very end from Middle Street to Ala Moana. What does that mean for the people of my district, for example? Will we still ride it? I can only speak for myself and many of my neighbors who I know where we leave from and where we go to, and I can tell you that we won't ride it because it won't take us here. And so a lot of the potential income and opportunity costs that we would lose would happen when we eliminate those systems. What I'm proposing, if possible, and again, I don't have all the numbers, and I don't think all of us in this room do either, is before a final decision is made, let's talk about everything station by station. Maybe it's not eliminating 8 stations along the route, because maybe we can't do changes according to some of the contracts that were already being given. But we can possibly eliminate stations that are close enough to each other where we're not going to lose an entire city area from the opportunity of the income that we would get from the ridership. Every time I testify, we know how much it costs, and no one has been more disappointed than the people of my district, who are the ones suffering every day, especially my Waianae residents that, of course, our chairwoman knows very well, who suffer sometimes a 2-hour drive or more just to get to town. The whole purpose of why we all supported it was from West Oahu to go from West Oahu to Ala Moana. That was the vision and the dream. So is there a way that we can still do that, but eliminate certain things along the route that would get us to the same place financially in terms of cost savings? I was just really disturbed and concerned when I heard certain people came to testify. And of course, I know there's a longer story than a soundbite that is just told to me in a sentence, that there's reasoning for those things. But I'm just asking you to consider, to have a little bit more time, if you have time, to consider getting some ridership numbers based on what I just said before you make a final decision.
Thank you very much. Members, any questions? Mr. Formby.
So, Councilmember Pine, I appreciate you coming over here from the Transportation Committee meeting, and perhaps I can allay some of your concerns that there will be a full discussion. So the HART board itself is not the decider. We are going to make a recommendation to the City Council, and then in a public setting, it will be discussed at the City Council. And I think what's probably gotten out with a little bit of misinformation is both what Chair Martin wrote in his letter dated June 14th and what the mayor said today. And I should clarify on behalf of the mayor, I think Chair Martin's letter speaks for itself. He does talk about equally important is the fact that it does not preclude us from eventually completing the full 20 miles and 21 stations at a time when, as you so sensibly state in your letter, we have streamlined our organizational structure and recalibrated a critical path for project completion that is entirely consistent with our expected financial resources. The mayor came here today and similarly said he's committed to the 20 miles, 21 stations, but what we've been asked to do by August 7th, and we've asked for an extension, but as of today, we've been asked to tell the FTA by August 7th, what can you do for $6.8 billion? That's a different question and in a different answer than what the people are hearing. The people are hearing that somehow the mayor and the chair have decided to stop this project at Middle Street, and that's not what they said. What we're trying to do is maximize the federal funds by keeping all 1.55 billion by answering the FTA's question. And that is, what can you do for 6.8 billion? But we're in no way saying that this project is ending at Middle Street. And we will be looking at all those other factors, and it will be discussed at council in a public setting for you to ask all of those questions. But at the end of the day, it's about keeping all of the federal funds and then finding a path forward from Middle Street to Ala Moana.
Thank you for your clarification.
Yeah.
I guess I read things into a question a little differently than you are. You're giving just one answer to the question.
Right.
I really believe that we should give multiple answers based on various public testimony. And I'm just representing my district and people that I know very well, that I think I can speak for them, is that when you say it's stopping at Middle Street and you're giving that recommendation to the federal government, that's it, pow. What they want to see is we can do this, 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 based on true facts and figures, not just say, let's press the easy button and stop at Middle Street, because that's what we know we can afford. We're going to have to just work a little harder, somehow get ridership numbers. HART was able to get ridership numbers before we voted on it and have estimates for that. So I see that there's no problem in them somehow finding some other estimates, station by station or region by region. Maybe the bus system can tell you how many people use transit at a particular location. I just feel that if we just give one answer, then we're going to be stuck with it. And then all the analysis will be only going to that one answer without thinking outside of the box that, wait, there might be multiple answers that might be better than this particular one.
Right, and so I think the good news here is that you're actually going to tell that to us. Okay. So the City Council is the one that's going to tell us what the HART board is going to empower the staff and the city to negotiate with the FTA, because it's the council that currently selected the locally preferred alternative as the build out. So all we're going to be doing is make a recommendation to council, and then council will have the public vetting of that recommendation and will come back and tell us, this is what we would like you to do. And so if you're able to work with the other council members and come back to us as you described it with different options, then that's what you'll tell us.
So we would need to have a meeting soon then.
Yes.
Because, so all we have to say is please come up with multiple options to present to the FTA instead of this one option.
Right.
Well, I think that we have to be very candid. So we have an August 7th deadline, and the executive director has been in contact with the FTA. They don't expect us to have all the details. However, they expect us to have a roadmap. And I think that's the word that they used. In other words, that we have taken these steps, and this is where it looks like. What both, I believe that the board is tasked with now. As you know, we had a June 8th hearing, which we asked the staff to say, 6.8 is what we've got. What can we do? And it's been laid out. I don't know if you've seen that PowerPoint, where almost every station has some value to it, as well as what the various alternatives are. And no one, we've had members who sit here who said no one likes any of the alternatives, but notwithstanding, FTA has made it very clear we can't say, like we did in 2014, give us some time and we will try to find some money. That is not an alternative. It is billed within your budget. And that's what we are tasked with. So it is truly, I believe, the council's and the mayor, through the mayor's actions as well, that's going to decide this, and you're going to end up tasking the board, which will then task HART, the staff, to negotiate with the FTA and come up with an alternative. I agree. It's not the perfect world situation, but one, we do not have the money. The estimates by both the HART staff is at $7.9 billion. As you know, FTA's is between 7.7 billion and 8.01 billion. So this is a time when everyone seems to be pretty close. And unfortunately, what we are stuck with is an August 7th deadline to come up with something. So you have our commitment that we'll of course work very closely with council, and we have council chair's position, we have the mayor's position. Mayor's position was Middle Street now, but committed to the LPA which would be Manoa, as well as the council chair's position is maybe we got to do Middle Street, but look into the future all the way to Ala Moana, the MOS. So I don't think we have much of a disagreement. It's just a matter of where's the money, how do we do it, and when do we do it. So I think that now what we need to do is we just have to come up with something to satisfy the August 7th deadline.
Just one final comment based on that information. I do want to thank all of you so much for volunteering for this most crazy job of your life. But if I can just give feedback from today, as the HART staff did give us information. What I'm coming here for then, I guess before it comes back to the council, I'm hoping it's not the same presentation. I hope that the presentation that includes all the options that we're going to vote on is going to have a deeper financial analysis, station by station, ridership by ridership. Which region should we focus on the most? If we take away this station, how much would we lose if we already contracted it? What would be the opportunity cost in the future if we eliminate that station and instead build downtown or Kaka'ako? I still feel from a financial perspective, I feel like I can't make a decision as a council member that I'm making the best fiscal decision on how to complete this project to keep within our budget. Because as a fiscal conservative, this whole thing has been driving me pretty crazy with all these cost overruns. But I think now we cannot make decisions on that are not clear anymore. We have to say, okay, we have every number that's been given to us, and this is the decisions that we're going to be making. I can tell you from the information that was presented to the council today, we need more information from HART to help us to make a better decision when it does come to us.
I think that, and we will take that to heart, no pun intended, but I think that the main issue that we have is I think we're tasked with making the first policy call.
Yeah.
And I think that's what both the mayor plus the council chair has asked of HART. But ours is non-binding. In other words, this would be our recommendation. So we are going to go through the same process you are, public hearings, and come up with a recommendation. And then it's going to be up to the city council as the ultimate decision maker on this as to how you proceed. But we will do our best cut at what we're all dealt with, and that's exactly what we have.
Thank you, Chair Martin. I'm Chair Hanabusa. I'm still thinking about what I did this morning. It haunts me regularly.
I hope it's not our haircut. I can see you telling that to Dad.
But I still love him. I love all of you. You know, I just want to make sure that my constituents at least are heard in what they're thinking. But thank you so much for your service to all of us. Mahalo so much.
Thank you, Councilor.
Thank you for being
Thank you. Thank you, members. So now, no wonder they're here. It's the land acquisition and eminent domain discussion and action. Jesse Suki and Morris Atta. I believe, members, that 2, 4.
We don't have quorum.
We don't have quorum. We're going to have to go through the We will eventually be moving into executive session on this part, but we don't have we have one member who will be joining us later. So in the meantime, why don't you quickly go through your proposed eminent domain, just so that we have it before us.
Okay,
Unless you want to defer?
yeah, we can defer when we get another member, but yeah, I'd like the members who are going to be in executive session to sort of hear what we're going to say about some choices that we have to make about acquisition. So if we could defer.
Okay, why don't we defer you until Member Lee gets back.
Thank you.
Okay, let's move to item number 13, members. Discussion and decision on Pearl Highlands parking garage information. Aki? Okay, hang on.
Hi.
Hi.
My name is Aki Marso. I'm the Land Use and Sustainability Manager for HART. So I'm just providing an update on the request from the board actually to explore P3 options for the Pearl Highland parking garage and transit center. So just for a historical overview, because I don't know if everyone was present during the initial decision making, in July of last year, so around this time, HART removed the Pearl Highlands Garage and Transit Center design build solicitation and deferred it as secondary mitigation against cost overruns. And around October of last year, during a board meeting, the board advised that we actually include the transit center back into the design build package due to the ridership consequences that removing it might have. And we were advised that we should explore P3 opportunities, public-private partnership opportunities for the parking garage. So in exploring these opportunities, we realized that we couldn't actually separate the ramp, the parking garage, and the transit center because structurally their design is very integrated. So just for a general overview, this is looking EVA bound. You can see that the transit center is, do I have it? Okay. So this is the H2 highway that leads into a ramp that HART is designing. And this is the 1,600 stall parking garage that HART has designed. The guideway is right here. And the ramp goes through the parking garage and exits onto a bus transit center right here. The Pearl Highlands station itself is situated in this location directly across from Century Park Plaza. They're known as the Twin Towers, I guess, colloquially. And the Pearl Highlands shopping center is located diamond head of this location. So I have a few other angles available for you. So this is looking Mauka. And then in the diamond head direction. And here you can see a little bit better that, whoops, sorry. The off-ramp from the H2 highway enters into the parking garage at two different locations. First on the bottom floor, the ground floor, and then second on the third floor. So this is a bus-only entrance. Automobiles can enter in this area, which is the third floor of the parking garage. And then there's exits here as well. So as you can see, from a design perspective, the whole system is very highly integrated. And so just to remove, say, the transit center and put that into a standard design build contract and then issue the parking garage as a P3 would be very challenging and probably not very efficient. So what we did was, given that advice, we issued a request for information, which is a non-binding kind of solicitation just for information from the industry to see if there was any interest in committing to some kind of public-private partnership arrangement. And in our responses, so we issued the RFI on March 21st, and we received responses on May 20th of last month. We received 6 responses, ACS Infrastructure Development and Dragados, Hunt Companies, Macquarie Capital, Nordic PCL and Fengate, Plenary Group, and Project Finance Advisors Limited and Colliers International. So 6 pretty robust responses providing information of what would be possible in a P3 arrangement. And they were very consistent in their responses. So I think the information that we received from them is reliable information. The first response, so when we went into this exploratory kind of adventure, I think everyone kind of thought that perhaps including some kind of transit-oriented development, some kind of commercial development would offset the cost of constructing a parking garage. And the general response from the industry was that that would not be ideal, that would not be possible. So what we learned is there's no such thing as free money. Instead, they advise us to structure the public-private partnership in what's called an availability payment model, in which they would design, build, finance, operate, and maintain the structure, and we would pay them once the facility became available through a set time period. So throughout a period of 40 years, or some agreed upon term. So in that sense, the risk of cost delays, schedule, that type would be transferred over to the private entity. So I think that's not initially what we were expecting in a response, but if we are to move forward with a public-private partnership, that's probably what the procurement would look like. So the next steps would be to see what the value of a P3 procurement is compared to, say, just a standard design build with the operation and maintenance included. At a later stage, we're going to do what's called a preliminary options analysis, which is basically a kind of high-level value for money analysis. So you'll have more concrete numbers to work with if that's your preferred kind of desire moving forward.
Members, any questions of Aki?
Who ends up owning the parking structure?
We would own the parking structure.
Kind of like a turnkey.
It's
just we're paying for it over 40 years.
No, but I thought that they would retain operational and maintenance responsibility.
And then after 40 years, they would turn it over to HART.
So during that period of time, what is the nature of the title that's being held? I mean, they're going to be the fee owner or the lessee. How is it structured?
They would essentially hold a ground lease of some sort, and we would, over a 40-year period, and we would retain ownership. I would add to that, before joining HART, I worked on development project real estate. And a lot of times the concept of P3s gets thrown around. And it's thrown around as this solution to pay for elements of public projects. And that's not always the case. Usually what a P3 is used for, it's a form of public-private sector finance to shift risk related to timely delivery and cost onto the private sector. And in return for that, the private sector usually gets some kind of revenue stream of income. In the case of this, there would be some policy decisions that the board would have to make, or council, whomever makes those decisions, about revenue streams, because the parking, according to the RFI responses, the parking wouldn't generate enough revenue to pay back these financing structures that they were setting up. And so they talked about availability payments, which is what Aki mentioned. And basically, availability payments is another way to guarantee funding to pay on the financial vehicle that they set up. So that would require some kind of guaranteed stream of income from the general fund, or allocation of the GET tax, or tolls, or something. So we're not getting a subsidized project. We're getting a less risky, cost delivery stable, time stable project. Separate from that is the concept of these development rights, right? And that was something we threw out there for the proposers to consider as well. And like Aki said, they separated that P3 concept from the TOD part of it, because the TOD doesn't pay an income stream to the P3 financing vehicle. So the way they looked at it was the P3 would be separate. But TOD can, selling development rights on the stations, for example, even. And this is why this exercise was good too. It kind of gave us more insight into development rights and what that might mean. If we sold development rights and in the market some developer was interested, we might get that money up front, and that might be able to be used to offset costs. Sound Transit in Seattle did it for the Capitol Hill station, but in that case, Sound Transit built
at least the basic station structure, reserving what they call the box. They built that, and reserving the opportunity for the developer to build above, on, and around the structure. And then from that, they got a payment, and then they got revenue from concessions and such that they got in the future. And New York did a similar thing for this station, where they sold development rights above this station because they weren't going to use it to a developer and use that money to fund the project. So two different approaches there. The P3, which is that finance vehicle, which is usually not a big money maker for the investor, but it's a stable investment that they can put into some fund. And then there's the selling of the development rights, right? And so what we were looking at here is primarily, in the end, I think, the P3 part of it, the financing vehicle, and what we would need to, the next step to do that. And we brought on an expert who does this around the country to give us some insight and look at those options analysis specifically. And I'm not sure, was TOD going to be part of that too, the development rights part of it, or was he going to focus just on the P3 part of it?
He's not an expert in TOD.
Right, it's the P3
so
part, right?
he's much more of an infrastructure expert, but that's certainly something we can look at. I also want to clarify, while the responses said that there wasn't much interest in developing TOD at the specific location, there is still an opportunity of kind of transit-related commercial activity, so say a newspaper stand, a cafe, something like that. So there still can be commercial activity, and as long as there's kind of a nexus, there's interest in developing that, but just not like a hotel or a shopping mall or something more significant.
Thank you, Chair. So Aki, I do appreciate you bringing DJ Gribben over to meet with us and talk about this. And I have to say, I understand that P3 as a concept is rather broad and people think about it differently. But up until that meeting with DJ, I had been thinking more along the lines of development potential and activation of the ground floor transit center parking garage so that we could have an opportunity for the riders from the beginning to buy groceries and provisions either on the way in or the way out. And then when the presentation came and it was more about infrastructure, the questions that went through my mind, and then I subsequently discussed it with the chair, she was at a different meeting but called me afterwards to discuss it, was it seemed like it's a financing option which comes at a cost. You know, you're paying for that financing over 40 years. And yes, it reduces the risk of O&M and all that kind of stuff for 40 years. But at the end of the day, you're paying for that cost. And so the question that I asked of him is, what is the color of this money? Because if the availability payments that we make on an annual basis are O&M cost, then the city council is going to want to know and be a part of that conversation, because that's under a capital project. And so the color of the money and how we pay for it and what's the rate of return to the developer that we're paying for versus bonding, which is it's got to be cheaper than financing over 40 years. I mean, those are the kind of things that I think I would have to know before I feel comfortable with this. And then second, I'm not even sure within our legal framework we can do this, because our GET and our federal funds may not allow us, and the ordinances may not allow us to look at a 40-year payout for a capital structure. I just don't know, and I feel like we need all those questions answered before we can, at least before I can say that this is the way to go.
Yeah, I totally agree, and I think those are some of the findings we made. And so we're not advocating one way or the other, but we did take a hard look to see what would be the advantages of the P3 or the development rights sort of model. As far as the legal issues, we did reach out, and we do have the concession laws. There are opportunities for have these long-term leases. We do it on the state side. Where the funding comes from, if we do a P3 where we're guaranteeing payments, I mean, that would be some issue. We need, like, if it is GET, we'd have to figure out how to get that.
Well, GET ends 2027. Right. I mean, we know the answer to that right now.
Right.
And the FFGA, if we get all of that, is 1.55 billion. Right. So it would seem that it would have to be another source of revenue if it's going to go 40 years. And where that comes from, I don't know.
So on some other models, there was different funding sources that they use in other projects. They have small starts programs. You might be able to use some of that federal money. So there's different options to explore. Our full funding grant agreement currently probably does not. I don't think it would allow us to do it that way. We'd have to find local funding or some other grant opportunity.
So what's the bottom line for this item on our agenda?
So
it's a discussion and decision
yeah,
on
so
Pearl Highlands.
the decision I think would be, knowing what we know now, would the board want us to take this next step and further explore the idea of the P3? And I think as you folks have come to understand from your meetings with DJ, it's really another form of project delivery. It's not going to be the panacea. It's not going to save us a bunch of money, but it does help us on the risk side. Perhaps it may help us on guaranteeing, the cost, because that risk is shifted to the private. So it really, if the board would like us to explore this further as an option, I think that's what we're looking for.
Members, any concerns? Terry.
Not concern, but a question. The mayor and the council has encouraged us to consider building the rail to Middle Street, and then with the available funds we have. Obviously, the idea would be to finish the last 5 miles, and I this morning mentioned to Aki, is there a possibility that we could look at a private investor that invests in these public infrastructure projects to build out the remaining 5 miles, and look at the economics of that type of arrangement? What kind of return would they require? What kind of subsidy would the government have to pay them? Maybe they end up operating the entire rail line, the entire 20 miles, keep all the fare, presumably they can operate it more efficiently. DJ told me that they tend to project their revenues a little higher sometimes, and so, maybe there's a structure there that might make some sense to actually get the entire 20 miles built. So that'd be something I'd be interested in learning more about.
As opposed to just Pearl Highlands.
Right.
Members, any further discussion?
No, but can I add, I agree with that, because to me, Pearl Highlands, time-wise, is something that we're better off building sooner rather than later. And so the longer we postpone the decision to build that project, the more out of line it is with a phase 1, either to Aloha Stadium, or if it ends up being all the way to Middle Street, whatever phase 1 gets defined at within the next 90 to 120 days. This needs to be a part of that. So to me, I would look at P3 opportunities on the east, on the Dillingham corridor, and try to find a way to get this in to the, I know it's in the budget right now, but get it moving. That's just my personal opinion, because it's so important to the functionality of phase 1.
Any other comments? Personally, one of the things that bothers me is I understand the idea of transferring the risk, but the money is another part of it, and there is no question. The bonding, if we have to bond, and in this case it would be a short-term bond, because everything that we're talking about up until Middle Street, or the airport segment, is supposed to be paid for between the GET and then the FFGA. So I can't see a situation where we would go through this whole practice of disrupting it now and trying to figure how this interfaces. Because as I believe we were told, no one's interested in Pearl Highlands in terms of a TOD. So it's an infrastructure matter. And infrastructure, to me, makes most logical sense that HART builds it. Because it doesn't seem to fit any other way.
Actually, there was some interest in the TOD, but I think, and we may even still entertain that, but that's something that might not happen prior to operation, and it's not going to pay for the the structures. Might help
Right.
with operations and maintenance. We collect on concessions or a ground lease where they pay rents and that sort of thing. And that would help with ridership and create a better pedestrian atmosphere then.
But as you said, that's not something that's going to build the infrastructure, which is the whole idea of why we're exploring this.
Right.
Yes. Kwan.
Thank you. I'm going to be gone at the end of the month, but still, this is very, very interesting to me. And so I'm having a hard time understanding how you have a private partnership to build infrastructure when we know what the sources of revenues are, and then you got to pay back the investor, and as has been indicated, 1.55 billion from the federal government. GET goes to 2027, and we collect fares and so forth. So I'm trying to figure out, well, how is it different from just going out and getting bond financing? So I'm having a hard time with that. The question I have would be pretty much as Chair Hanabusa has indicated, let's figure out a way where you're going to build the remaining 5 miles. Let's assume that everybody, the focus today has been on stopping at Middle Street, so there's an additional 5 miles. What kind of structure can you folks identify, that's been used successfully someplace else, that builds it out and completes the project as planned, the locally preferred alternative, and the minimum operable segment of the locally preferred alternative, and then figures out what kind of add-on revenues or things can be done to enhance the revenue base to get it done, because clearly we're short, sounding like we're short like 1.1 billion. And so what kinds of structures like that you folks can help the project identify that could be pursued, recognizing that you want to build it out, and what other additional, and in my mind, what it really comes down to is what other sources of revenue are going to be available other than ones that we know are there already. And it's not, I'm not asking, just kind of asking you folks to, to think about that as you do your exploration.
Yeah, I don't have an answer now, but some things that kind of come to the top is, so revenue from fares. So I think we pretty much have to rule that out, because that then raises an issue of equity.
Well, the revenues, we know that even when you get revenues from fare, there's going to be a subsidy.
Right.
We know, so you got so much money from the GET, you got so much money from the FTA, you're going to get revenues from fares, but even with that, you're going to be you're going to have to be subsidized.
Right.
The operation will have to be subsidized. So it's something in addition.
Something else, right?
Something else, and I'm not sure what that something else is. Whether it's putting a hotel over a station or put an apartment over the station or something like that, that's going to enhance your revenue base. That's the only way I can figure out how you're going to get somebody to come in. I'm sure there are investors who are willing to, that have money, want to put it into profit-making activities, but what is that activity? Given the project as it's been planned.
We would like to see them come forward, because for the stations moving forward, and I think there's definitely going to be an incentive if we stop at Middle Street, because there's a lot of ridership down there.
Well, I think, and it just happens that people let me know that they have money and they have different sources of money, but they're not going to go do the plan. They want to see what is it that you got.
Right. Yeah.
Yes.
Further to that point, though, are the stations engineered so that they can carry the load of additional structures above, or would it have to be independently supported?
My understanding is they're currently not designed to support another structure, but what we can do is look at the station areas where it might make sense because of the shape, size, and location. And if it makes sense to add FAR and height, then we would look at, again, doing the minimal, because we, generally talking to the design and construction safety folks, we want to be in control of the basic guideway, right?
Mhm.
And then we allow them to build over and above.
Any further comments? Members, I am inclined to recommend, and the board can disagree, that we just defer this matter, simply because I can't see how exploring something like this at this stage is going to help any of the ridership numbers that we have to contend with in negotiating with the FTA. I think we have to assume that the transit station and the garage at Pearl Highlands is built as part of this, because if we don't, how are we going to account for about 11,000 riders? And I believe that as it now stands, the cost of Pearl Highlands is part of the CIP budget that we just approved. So I feel that it's sort of contrary to the action that we took as a board. So if there's no objection, I'd like to defer on this. And if in the future, Jesse, you guys come up with another P3 idea that takes us further down, fine. But I think a P3 at Pearl Highlands doesn't fit into what we need to do now.
Okay.
Members? Any disagreement? If not, with that, we're going to just defer on this.
Okay. And just to say that, but we'll continue to look at opportunities down the line. I think that was something that both Chair Martin and the mayor was interested in, so we'll still explore those options.
I think that's better spent than trying to do something with something that we need now desperately to be part of our numbers.
Okay.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Now, thank you, Aki. Now, members, we're going to go back to land acquisition and eminent domain discussion and action. Now, Jesse, do you want to go into executive session first on this? I have it on the agenda as executive session first before we go through all the various resolutions.
Yes.
So, members, may I have, oops. Oops.
Bad timing.
Oops. We are going to have to wait a little bit. But for the rest of us, the motion is going to be to enter into executive session pursuant to Hawaii Revised Statute 92-4, subsections 92-5A4 and 92-5A2 to consider matters pertaining to the land acquisition and eminent domain discussions and actions, and the board's powers, duties, privileges, immunities, and liabilities with regard to the eminent domain matters basically set forth in this part. So that's the motion, and if somebody can, I guess we have to wait till he gets back. It's not him yet. We have a couple of more executive sessions yet.
Move to go into executive session.
Okay.
Second.
Second. Members, it's been moved and seconded. Are we on agreement on this?
Yes.
We're in executive session. Members, we are back from executive session. I'm going to pick up on item 12, land acquisition and eminent domain discussion and action. Members, it is the chair's recommendation that given the situation that we are now faced with, that we defer on these matters until we have a better sense as to what this board and city council will do.
So moved.
So moved.
I move for deferral.
Second.
Any further discussion? Members, by the way, any members of the public would like to express an opinion on this before we vote? So it's moved and seconded. Members, any discussion? If not, we have unanimous consent on this? Yes. So we are deferring that. The next item is item 14, resolution number 201624, relating basically to our tax-exempt commercial paper program. Diane, can we do this very quickly?
Yes, we can. Good afternoon, Diane Arakaki, Chief Financial Officer again. This item, although we had drafted a resolution for you, one is not necessary, so this is an informational item to you, the board, from staff, to summarize the background and inform you of the need for and planned request by HART CEO to the City Department of Budget and Fiscal Services to draw on the $350 million tax-exempt commercial paper facility as authorized by you and the City Council. If you recall, so it's not a resolution, it's just an update. If you recall, all bonds, this is section 109 from the Article 17 of the City Charter with relating to HART. All bond sales must be subject to council approval at the request of the authority. Council may, by resolution, approve, and the Director of Budget and Fiscal Services, when so directed by the board, shall sell bonds for the acquisition, construction of the fixed guideway system in accordance with the procedures prescribed by law for such sales. Members, Chair, members, if you recall, in April of 2015, the council authorized a resolution including a memorandum of understanding between HART and the City Department of Budget and Fiscal Services concerning issuance of general obligation bonds. Also, in November of 2015, your board requested approval by City Council for the issuance and sale of commercial paper. Council also, via Ordinance 15-46, approved the issuance and sale of city general obligation commercial paper for the purposes of applying the proceeds to include on this project. Also in November, the City Council Resolution 15-314 authorized the sale of commercial paper not to exceed $350 million. And so what I'm here to inform you of today is we are approaching the point in time at which we will need to borrow in order to continue financing the project. So what you see here is our current estimated cash balance, estimated expenditures through June 30th of $55.6 million, and estimated expenditures through the end of July. So we're spending about $60 million a month. Our estimated grant revenue drawing down against the grant at $38.7 million for an estimated cash balance at the end of July at $27.8. And I want to thank Ms. Iwasa for pointing out my typo. It's really $25,700,000, which I'm currently estimating where we'll be at the end of July. So bringing our minimum, we have per the MOU with the city, we are to maintain a minimum cash balance averaged over 3 months of $25 million. So we're going to be getting very close, and I anticipate perhaps needing to issue debt in order to pay our bills for cash flow purposes. So that's the purpose of the item before you today, is to inform you that sometime in July or shortly thereafter, we will be needing to draw on the facility that you all approved in November and was set up via the city's Department of Budget and Fiscal Services as of the first of this calendar year. So that facility is ready and available for us with, I am told, approximately 2 weeks' notice. We will be able to draw down in order to fund our expenditures. And I estimate the initial draw to be $20 million.
Members, any questions? Diane, one of the comments that we're hearing is that we need to pass a specific resolution in order for you to even draw on the 300 or call upon the $350 million commercial paper. Is that true?
I don't believe it's so, and I've had it confirmed with Core Counsel that no further resolution is necessary given prior ordinances and resolutions by both this board and the city council. And that's why I'm turned this into an informational item.
And but you will notify us prior to, just whether it be through Cindy and Cindy notify the board members, when and if you are calling upon the commercial papers with 2-week notice.
Yes, and also in your packets, and I believe was posted on the website, is a draw request that Dan, as the CEO, will be making of the city. And once he fills that out, we will be providing you a copy of that. Also included in your packet is a tax certificate that the city has submitted with their bond counsel that will be distributed to the markets.
And Diane, I've also requested of you to give us an update as to the drawdown of the federal funds, because, you know, the issue is whether or not, if we are not drawing down federal funds appropriately, then we may not need to go to commercial paper. Because remember, this came up last year in November, and the representation made to the board was that you'd require this commercial paper by January. And you have not yet drawn down or in any way called upon the commercial paper for that period of time, correct?
Yes, that's correct.
So given the history of how we haven't had to use it, luckily, and the fact that we should have a very good or a better assessment of how we draw down on the federal funds, because we know we have about a $250 million tranche still outstanding, we would hope that you do not have to draw down on any commercial paper.
Yes.
So you will notify us again as we get closer to July. July is the earliest expected date.
Yes.
Correct.
As of what we know today. And I would add 2 caveats in there, or this estimate is based on assumptions that our current assumptions on right-of-way acquisition expenditures are what we've planned, and the airport station guideway contract and its award and any expenditures for that occurring in July and in subsequent months. So if our assumptions change based on events that have yet to take place, we will, it could possibly impact our cash flow, and I will inform you as to its impacts.
And the next GET installment will be general excise tax installment?
We are expecting it, as we normally get it, the end of the month following the close of the calendar quarter. So we are anticipating getting the next GET revenue installment the end of July.
So that's why we're looking at this situation.
Yes, we're looking at it based on the assumptions these estimates are based on. We would need to draw before getting the GET. Now, of course, if something changes, clearly we would not borrow unless we needed to. So if our revenue, our cost estimates, our expenditure estimates come in under what I've listed here, then there's a very good possibility we won't need to borrow in July, because then we will be getting GET revenue at the end of July, which could then take us through August and maybe even into September.
Okay.
So I will provide you updates.
Members, any questions? Yes.
Yeah, Diane, I have one, and that is, I guess I'm trying to get a sense for all those things that we do that do cause us to draw down on cash. And one of them is probably change orders that staff is negotiating with, like Kiewit. And I understand they have quite a few change orders. So is that part of it? I mean, staff's also negotiating on change orders and trying to figure when they can make those payments, and all of that goes into available cash balance, and is that correct?
Yes, and I'll ask them for an update on that as well before making a draw on the commercial paper.
Yeah, because I think it's important for us to know that there's a process by which contractors who are nearing the end of their contracts know that the change orders are going to be processed in a timely manner and brought to the board when necessary for our review and approval. And I know that all impacts cash flow. And then, as the chair pointed out, how we draw down on the tranches for those that are appropriate for federal reimbursement. I think, it all fits together, and I know it's complex, but At the end of the day, it affects when we draw on commercial paper, and we don't want to draw on commercial paper until we absolutely have to, right?
Absolutely, yes.
Okay.
So I will include that in our assessment as we go forward.
Any other questions, members? If not, thank you, Diane. Members, we've been asked to take out of order sale of Ansaldo Breda and Ansaldo STS to Hitachi. Nicole Chapman? Nicole, do we need to go into executive session?
I don't believe so, depending on what we're discussing today.
Okay.
So, Nicole Chapman, Director of Procurement and Contracts, for the record. I'm here with Joe Stewart, who is our outside legal counsel, who's been assisting us in with this issue. And I'm not sure. I'm sure the board is aware that recently we received a request from HJB for HART's consent regarding the change in control of Ansaldo STS. But I'll let Joe give you an overview, and if you have any questions, we can both answer any questions.
Okay, since we've been here a couple of times before, I don't want to get too much into the weeds, but on a high level, basically, Ansaldo Honolulu JV has had two constituent members in the joint venture, Ansaldo Breda and Ansaldo STS. The original request received last year was to sell the assets of Ansaldo Breda to Hitachi Rail Italy, which is an indirectly owned subsidiary of Hitachi Limited, the Japanese multi-billion-dollar corporation. The status on that is that HART has given preliminary approval subject to the accuracy of the representations made over the course of, as you can see, a whole binder full of communications back and forth and review of a lot of documents by HART staff along with my office. The next step on that would be an amendment of the core systems contract to replace some of the documentation to reflect Hitachi as the AHJV member rather than Ansaldo Breda. So, as Nicole said, recently at the end of April, an additional request was received from Ansaldo STS, or from Ansaldo Honolulu JV, I should say, but relating to a change of control of Ansaldo STS. And so, again, to make it clear, Ansaldo Honolulu JV still will be the counterparty for the core systems contract. Ansaldo STS still will be a member in that joint venture. Upon approval and amendment of the contract, the other joint venture partner would be Hitachi Rail Italy. So, but the same entity, Ansaldo Honolulu JV, would still be the counterparty. Right now, where we are in regard to that second request, and again, this is another request that's even further up the chain than the Ansaldo Breda request, which was at least substituting a member of the actual joint venture. In this case, what we're talking about is a change of control. The joint venture member itself will stay the same, Ansaldo STS. It's a publicly traded corporation in Italy, and all that is happening is that a majority of the shares are being purchased by Hitachi Rail Italy Investments, which is a different wholly owned indirect subsidiary of Hitachi Limited, the Japanese corporation. So, as Nicole said, at the end of April, HART received a request to consent to that change of control, which is required under the joint venture agreement that governs the actions of Ansaldo Honolulu joint venture. At this point, what we've done is HART staff, Nicole specifically, has sent out a request of a series of documents to review. Upon receipt, they will be reviewed and then determined as to whether or not that's something that either more information is needed on, or whether or not HART can provide that consent required under the AHJV operating agreement. In the meantime, all performance bonds are in place, parent guarantees required under the contract are in place. So, you know, we're making sure that HART remains protected to the fullest extent that it was, you know, before we started. And I guess you know, as to the status of the contract, I have to defer to HART management, but that's you know, not taking anything away of certainly, and making sure that HART remains protected throughout the process.
Members, any questions?
Yeah, you know, I'm new to the board, so you got me lost after, I guess, the initial description of the structure. Yeah. So As I understand it, AHJV is basically a partnership between Ansaldo Breda and Ansaldo STS, right?
That is correct.
So
yes.
that structure still remains in effect?
It remains in effect. It
remains in effect at that level?
Hitachi Rail Italy is purchasing the assets of Ansaldo Breda, one of which is its role in the Ansaldo Honolulu joint venture. So it will replace Ansaldo Breda as the other joint venture partner in Ansaldo Honolulu.
So there will be a substitution?
Correct.
So that would be Hitachi Italy?
Hitachi Rail Italy.
And what happens with Hitachi STS?
Ansaldo STS will remain the other joint venture partner, at least for the foreseeable future. That's not the request that's been made to HART. STS will remain the other joint venture partner. The request that's been made to HART as to that is merely as to a change of control of that entity, Ansaldo STS. That is a publicly traded company, and Hitachi Rail Italy Investments is purchasing what will end up being a majority of the interest, the shares, if you will, of Ansaldo STS. And upon completion of that, then it will be the majority owner of the entity, Ansaldo STS, which will again remain the other joint venture partner in Ansaldo Honolulu joint venture, which is the counterparty to this contract.
Okay, so it's the same Hitachi entity that is on both sides of the JV?
Two different Hitachi entities, actually. One is called Hitachi Rail Italy, and the other one is Hitachi Rail Italy Investments. They're both ultimately indirectly owned by Hitachi Limited through Hitachi Europe, which then owns 100% of Hitachi Rail Europe, which then owns Hitachi Italy Rail Holdings, and further down the corporate chain. But it's a series of a corporate.
So Hitachi Rail Italy is 100% owner of Breda?
Yes.
Yes.
Okay. And majority owner of STS?
Hitachi Rail Italy Investments will be the majority owner of STS.
Okay.
Yes.
All right. Got it.
Yeah.
Sorry, I apologize. I was trying to move fast since I know it's been a long day for everybody, but
Director Formby.
And then both Hitachi entities are, per written agreement, requesting the consent of the HART board?
Well, actually, Ansaldo Honolulu Joint Venture is requesting the consent because that's the counterparty to the contract on behalf of their constituent joint venture partners, their members, if you will.
Okay. Any other questions from any of the members?
Are Breda and STS equal partners?
Well, in terms of they're joint and severally liable for the obligations of Ansaldo Honolulu, but in terms of the work that they're going to do, Breda was, for simplistic terms, the construction entity, and STS was the operational entity.
In terms of overall financial investment, if I remember correctly, it's approximately 60% STS and 40%.
Yeah, I thought it was I thought it was 62, 38, something like that.
Something
very
like
close to.
64.
Okay, yeah, that's, yeah.
Okay, I have a question. My understanding is that Breda was bought by Hitachi Rail Italy.
Yes.
And the initial transaction, 40% of Ansaldo STS was bought by Hitachi Rail Italy as well. The initial.
Right.
Because the question I raised was, why isn't that a control issue? Because 40% of a publicly held corporation is probably equivalent to control. Now what you've said is that it's Hitachi Italy Investment that bought, I assume, the remaining portion of it. So what did it do with the Hitachi Rail Italy 40% of Ansaldo STS?
Hitachi Rail Italy Investments, under the original agreement, was going to make a tender offer to purchase all outstanding shares of Ansaldo STS. So ultimately, if the other shareholders are in agreement, Hitachi Rail Italy Investments would own the remaining 60% of this. Wasn't already owned by Finmeccanica.
But my understanding is they're at 51% now.
Yes.
So if that's the case, then Hitachi Rail Italy is different from Hitachi Rail Italy Investment, correct? So Hitachi Rail Italy is the 100% Breda, Ansaldo, Breda, with certain exemptions, as I remember that document. And Hitachi Rail Italy, not investment, bought the other 40% of Ansaldo STS.
That's correct.
That was the initial.
Yes.
So my question again is, as they said that Hitachi, when they told me Hitachi Rail Italy bought 51% now of Ansaldo STS, it's really not true, because you're saying Hitachi Rail Italy Investment, which is you clarified is a different entity from Hitachi Rail Italy, is the one who bought.
We have to look into
Right, well, the HRI Investments currently owns 50.77 shares is what they're saying, and so that's the request that they're asking for in addition to HRI, which owned 46% ultimately. So now they're combining the two essentially to say that that constitutes a change of control, and they're asking for a request.
Yeah, but
for
my
consent on it.
question still is, if they're separate entities, right, who are we dealing with? Because collectively, they own now, what is it? With STS having whatever portion that they have, they're about 40% and 60% of the joint venture is supposed to be Hitachi Rail Italy, but it's not Hitachi Rail Italy, because you have this other entity called Hitachi Rail Italy Investment.
So we are dealing with Ansaldo Honolulu joint venture. That is the counterparty to the Core Systems contract.
But don't we need to know who's who before we consent to whatever the control is? Because I'm not sure that if Hitachi Rail Italy Investment bought this delta between 50.7 and 40, that you necessarily have a control issue, unless part of that is they bought Hitachi Rail Italy in some form.
As mentioned, all we have on the STS aspect is merely the initial letter that's been sent requesting this consent, and we've asked for a lengthy amount of documents, including financials and other things. And so that will be part of the review process, is locking down what the relationships are so that we make sure that we understand. I mean, at the end of the day, the counterparty is still Ansaldo Honolulu. The joint venture partner for that is still Ansaldo STS. But knowing who actually is the owner is a consistent part of, will be a part of that process. But we're not there yet. We haven't even received responses yet at this point. So that'll be part of the process before any kind of consent is provided.
Well, the main issue that we have is the fact that if the charter amendment goes through, then the operations and maintenance part of what would be Core Systems is going to transfer to the City and County of Honolulu, DTS. And the problem is that when I looked at the exhibit, Ansaldo STS has basically exclusively the operations and maintenance portion of the joint venture. So arguably, what I want to know is that if we're going to ask for any kind of, or they're asking for any kind of consent, that we don't have any problems with the severing of the Core Systems contract, because we would have to sever, because it goes to DTS. It's no longer HART that's going to do operations and maintenance. So the question then becomes, who do we deal with on that? Do we sever? Is it Hitachi Rail Italy Investment, or is it Hitachi Rail Italy, or is it still the joint venture? But we need to understand who's who.
Yeah, well, I guess we'd have to address that look at the impact of the charter amendment. Obviously we'd have, if asked to address that question, I certainly have some thoughts on why it might make sense to remain the joint venture for joint and several liability purposes and some other things. But I think it would probably make more sense to see what the proposed structure is going to be, and then recommend a course of action at that point in time as to our structure.
Chair Hanabusa, can I also interject? I think we need to double check on when they did the initial sale agreement, and there was a closeout November 2nd of last year, that 40% of Finmeccanica share, whether it was sold, I believe it was to HRII, which is Hitachi Rail Italy Investment. So it's consistent in terms of the Finmeccanica share,
right?
Shares in ASTS, Ansaldo STS,
right?
That it's consistently was with Hitachi Rail Italy Investment.
And I think the problem is that the public's been informed that Hitachi, just Hitachi, bought all of Brita and 40% of STS. But actually, that's how the general public understands this. But in actuality, we're talking about more than one entity. And the question is whether there's something unique about these entities and how structurally they've been set up, because they're Italian corporations or entities, as I understand it. So they're different in how, because reading their documentation, you kind of get confused because, well, most of it is blitzed out. But the problem is, what is that structure so that we know? And procedurally, and this is something, Nicole, I've asked you to opine on, is what role does this board play? Because this board now, if the transfer goes through from HART to DTS on the operation and maintenance portion of it, I'm very concerned about the implications on how we cut the core systems contract, because we'll have to cut it.
And that's an issue for another, I guess, another discussion, whether we still retain the contract with HJV, who has obligations under our existing contract,
Right.
including operations and maintenance.
But my concern is we have to watch what's done in terms of legal implications as to whether or not we're going to, how does the city then cut, the people of the city and county of Honolulu, they vote this amendment through to the charter, right? And you transfer operations and maintenance responsibilities to DTS from HART, and you no longer have really this obligations with joint venture. Does that open us up for liability and open us up for any kind of damages? So those are the types of issues that I think we need to have answered, along with whether HART board consents, or is it the executive director who consents? And therefore, the board is out of it until, and if we get sued, then we have to, of course, contend with that. So with those things, can you follow up on that later? But I assume that this is just informational.
Yes.
As to what's going on.
Yeah, just wanted to offer an update on where we were since we had recently received the letter from the joint venture on the STS portion.
Anything else, members?
Is there a time frame for when this is expected to be completely closed? And
Well, we do have right now, the last action item, well, one of the last action items is for HART to give consent regarding the change in control of ASTS, of Ansaldo STS. So we do have to make a determination upon receipt of their documentation, and I'm not sure if we're going to have another board discussion prior to that consent, but we do need to do the consent, and after the consent, then we can do the paperwork in amending the contract. Then
Is there a timetable? Is there a deadline?
There isn't, but the request came on April 29th of this year.
So I guess you've just answered my other question, which is when I said, who does the consent? So you basically said that the consent can be given and then you report back to the board. So I'm interpreting that to mean that this board is not the entity that is going to consent.
Well, I think what I said was that we're going to look at the documents. They've requested a consent, and whether we need to hold another board meeting prior to the consent.
It would be my intention that even if the responsibility resided with my office, it would still be my intention prior to that consent to come to the board to brief you.
Thank you. Any other questions, members? If not,
Under the
yes.
agreement, if the charter amendment goes through, do we need to get their consent to transfer the contract?
I'd have to look at the assignment provisions. That's
right.
Because the original contract was actually with the city. This was that contract predated HART.
That's right.
And so I think it's been assigned, for lack of a better term, once already from the city to HART.
There's been an amendment. I think that's
Yeah.
the technical term.
An amendment, yes, yeah. But so I probably, but we'd have to look at the nature of the change from the charter amendment.
Yeah, I don't remember it running this way.
Yeah.
So it may be a breach.
Yeah,
That's my concern.
It wouldn't be an issue related to the joint venture agreement, I mean, which is the consent that we're talking about here. But as far as the actual core systems contract itself, it does have language addressing assignment or that type of action. So.
Any other questions, members? Thank you. Members, we have one more, thank you very much. We have one more item that we have to get through before we call it quits. So just so that everybody is aware, The chair is going to defer items 18 to 22. But we do need to go into executive session on the executive director CEO's performance evaluation and upcoming performance objectives. And that's because we've already had an HR meeting on that, but there are members here who are not part of that committee. So may I have a motion that pursuant to Hawaii Revised Statute 92-4 and subsections 92.5A and 92.5A2 to consider the annual evaluation of the executive director CEO where consideration of matters affecting privacy will be involved, and to consult with the committee's board attorneys, with the board's attorneys on questions and issues pertaining to the board's powers, duties, privileges, immunities, and liabilities with regard to these matters. May I have that motion?
So moved.
Second?
Second.
Thank you. Members, we're in executive session. Members, we're back from executive session. As you all know, it is about 5:08, and we have broken the record, as some people have been nice enough to tell me. So all the remaining matters on the agenda will be deferred. If anyone has any objections, please speak now. If not, I'll ask for a motion to adjourn. However, before I do that, I do want to thank Ivan Louis Kwan again, and to say that the people of the city and county of Honolulu got their money's worth out of you today, especially. And that's a lot, 0 out of 0. But members, hearing no objection, I'd like to call this meeting adjourned. Thank you.
Thank you.